Chapter 1781. Duan Lingtian, who had fallen, sat up on the riverbank and panted heavily. He was drenched in sweat. When he turned to look at the vast milky white force that filled the dried-up river, fear lingered in his heart. Just a little bit more, and I would have died. If he died, he would be kicked out. Since he had chanced upon such a divine ability relic, he was, naturally, unwilling to be kicked out just like that. To think I actually thought the waterfall-like milky white force was the third trial of the abyssal swamp. In hindsight, it's obvious what I've just experienced is the real third trial. Earlier, Duan Lingtian had felt the third trial could not have been so simple. However, he was uncertain because the force that had rained down on him like a waterfall when he exited was also a force to be reckoned with. For this reason, he kept wondering if it was the third trial or not. Now that all the pieces had come together, he realized what he had just experienced was the real third trial. The milky white force, the collapsed arch bridge, the flight-prohibiting formation, and the dried-up river was the third trial. Soon after, Duan Lingtian discovered the level of the milky white force inside the river kept rising. Although it would take some time before it would flood over the riverbank, he quickly stood up since his vitality had recovered slightly. The mist has vanished. When Duan Lingtian turned around, he discovered the mist he saw earlier at the end of the bridge had disappeared and was replaced with a mountain wall. A dead end. He was stunned when he saw the mountain wall that blocked his path. Due to the waterfall-like milky white force, the tunnel of the second trial was already flooded. It was impossible even if he wanted to turn back. If there was no way to move forward and no way to turn back, could it be that he had to wait for death here? Bang, bang, bang. When Duan Lingtian was burning with anxiety, a loud bang resonated from the top of his head. This noise that would usually sound cacophonous sounded heavenly to his ears. He instantly lifted his head and saw an entrance that could fit one person had opened up on the mountain wall. A ray of light shone out from inside as though it was guiding Duan Lingtian in. Due to the reason the flight-prohibiting formation only covered the river, Duan Lingtian, who was on the riverbank, could fly again as he pleased. Thud! He stomped both his feet on the ground as he rose up into the air, making his way toward the opening on the mountain wall above him. At the same time, he looked at the ray of light that seemed like it came from several hundred meters away. In other words, he had to fly up for another few hundred meters before he could reach the source of the light. It's good to be higher up. The moment Duan Lingtian thought of how the waterfall-like milky white force below was still increasing, and it would not be long before it flooded the entire place, he counted himself lucky. He felt lucky the next trial would be held at some place high where there would be no flood. As he was flying up, his heart sank a little the moment he recalled the dangerous situation earlier. The third trial is already this difficult. I wonder how terrifying the other 6 trials are going to be. Armed with the experience from the third trial, Duan Lingtian began to feel glum when he thought about how difficult the trials ahead would be. However, when Duan Lingtian was faced with the fourth trial, he realized it was not as dangerous as the third trial. The fourth trial was a test of martial technique instead of a test of strength. Martial technique. Although Duan Lingtian had abandoned a majority of the martial techniques he had previously cultivated, he was not at a disadvantage thanks to the Sovereign Heart Sword. For this reason, he easily passed the fourth trial. After the fourth trial, he was faced with the fifth trial. The fifth trial was also not a test of strength but a test of patience. 100,000 embroidery needles and 1 red thread. This was the fifth trial. This is really testing my patience. When Duan Lingtian saw the 100,000 densely packed embroidery needles, his mouth twitched. In the end, he still obediently picked up the red thread as his other hand picked up an embroidery needle, and he began to thread the red thread through the eye of the needle. Only by threading the red thread through 100,000 embroidery needles would he be able to pass the fifth trial. Although Duan Lingtian had a strong cultivation base, it was useless when it came to threading thread through the eye of a needle. Therefore, he could only obediently thread the red thread through the eyes of embroidery needles one after another like an ordinary person. Perhaps, to stop the challenger from cheating with their strength, the eye of the embroidery needle was even smaller than the red thread. Due to this, he could only slowly squeeze the red thread in and could not work as fast as he liked. It took Duan Lingtian a few days to complete the fifth trial. When he finally completed his task, his vision had turned blurry as well. If he had a choice, he would rather repeat the first trial. In fact, he was even willing to repeat the third trial. The fifth trial was just too mentally exhausting, even more so than the second trial. After passing the 5th trial, Duan Lingtian was not in a hurry to rush to the 6th trial. Instead, he stayed resting at the same spot. This was his first time taking a rest after he had entered the abyssal swamp. He had no choice but to rest since every time he opened his eyes, he could only see gleaming embroidery needles and a red thread in front of him. After resting for a day and a night, he finally went to the next trial. The 6th trial was not a test of strength as well. Comprehension. The 6th trial was a test of the challenger's comprehension. All Duan Lingtian needed to do was to fix some of the incomplete martial techniques. Naturally, these martial techniques were only techniques from human rank saint-grade martial tactics. If it was before, it would have been very difficult for Duan Lingtian. However, ever since he had obtained the sovereign heart sword and comprehended it to the 2nd stage, his judgment and understanding of martial techniques had already reached the highest stage. Therefore, it was not difficult for Duan Lingtian to fix the martial techniques from the human rank saint-grade martial tactics. Due to this reason, Duan Lingtian easily passed the 6th trial. The next trial was the 7th trial. Why do I feel like the trials in the abyssal swamp are getting simpler? When Duan Lingtian thought of the previous few trials, he could not help but think it was too simple. Soon after, he learned what the 7th trial was. Patience. Running. When he saw what he had to do for the 7th trial, he smiled. It was another simple test. However, when he carefully finished reading the content, the smile on his face froze. Run continuously for 7 days and 7 nights around this pillar in front of me. Moreover, I'll be kicked out if I fail to run fewer than 1 million circles. Duan Lingtian was shocked when he looked at the gigantic pillar that would need several dozens of people to completely surround it. He was dumbfounded. 7 days and 7 nights. 1 million circles. After making a circle around the pillar, a bitter smile formed on Duan Lingtian's face. I need to run around this pillar 1 million times in the span of 7 days and 7 nights. Even an ordinary person at the peak of the refined saint stage wouldn't be able to do it. To think I thought this trial was easy. What a test of patience. The bitter smile on Duan Lingtian's face became even more apparent. However, he had no other choice. It was not that he could not run around this pillar 1 million times in a span of 7 days and 7 nights, but the entire process was just too tedious. If he was not patient enough, he would not be able to last this long. I'll just have to run, I guess. After taking a deep breath, Duan Lingtian raised a hand and pressed a button protruding out at one side of the pillar. After he had activated the supervisory formation, he began to run around the pillar. He had activated his Sun True Origin, so his speed was extremely fast. In just a blink of an eye, he had already circled the pillar many times. It was still fine during the first 3 days. Duan Lingtian could still maintain his original speed. On the 4th day, no matter how he spurred himself on inwardly, he began to slow down. Currently, I'm already on the 7th trial. I only have 2 trials left. If I can't pass this trial, all my efforts would be in vain. The moment he thought of this, he picked up speed again. However, Duan Lingtian only managed to use this method to rouse his fighting spirit for an extra day before he became immune to it. The last 3 days were the hardest for Duan Lingtian. He felt the most tempted to give up. He even felt the 7th trial was the most difficult trial in the abyssal swamp so far. In the end, after 7 days and 6 nights, he finally completed running 1 million circles. After he finished running, he immediately collapsed to the ground, drenched in sweat. Although he was only a clone, it was not different from an ordinary body. He would still feel tired and sweat as well. Naturally, what he meant by ordinary body was the body of an ordinary person, not his real body. If it was his real body, it would not be a problem for him to run for 10 days and 10 nights, let alone 7 days and 7 nights. It has been such a long time since I last felt this tired. No, I must rest for 3 days. Although Duan Lingtian said he wanted to rest for 3 days after he finished running, after half a day of resting, he recovered his strength and decided to move to the 8th trial. The 8th trial was located in a vast underground palace. After he entered, he could sense an ancient, as though it had seen the vicissitudes of life, aura charging toward him. Duan Lingtian instantly felt as though he had been transported back into ancient times. The most eye-catching thing in the underground palace was the rows of statues arranged neatly in the distance. These statues were all armor-wearing soldiers that were made up of infantries, gunmen and cavalries. They're similar to the terracotta warriors in my past life. Are these statues the 8th trial? The moment Duan Lingtian thought of this, he instantly became guarded. Chapter 1782. One could see from afar the rows of soldier status were in a massive and strong formation. Don't tell me the 8th trial is to kill all of them. Duan Lingtian warily walked closer to the soldier formation before him. The formation formed from the 1,000 statues of soldiers seemed to subtly pressure him. He could not find the words to describe this sense of pressure. The distance between Duan Lingtian and the soldier formation gradually began to decrease as well. 500 meters, 300 meters, 100 meters. Just when Duan Lingtian was 100 meters away from the soldier formation, he suddenly felt something. He came to a halt with a frown on his face. At the same time, he could clearly see the soldier formation 100 meters away were seemingly coming alive one by one at this instant. Thump, 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 crack, 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 comma. A crisp cracking noise reverberated in the vast underground palace. As it turned out, the layer of stone on the surface of the 1,000 soldiers had begun to crumble, revealing their faces. Soldiers who appeared to be made from flesh and blood appeared one after another in front of Duan Lingtian. Although they looked like they were made of flesh and blood, their eyes were completely devoid of life. What's going on? Duan Lingtian was dumbfounded when he saw this. He did not expect the soldiers to be made of flesh and blood. Indeed, the 1,000 soldiers standing 100 meters away from him appeared like humans. Apart from having eyes that were devoid of life, they were no different from an ordinary person. Whoosh, 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 comma. At this moment, a gust of cold wind blew through the vast palace. The gust of wind felt strange. Although Duan Lingtian was not easily scared, he still felt chills running up his spine. These soldiers, at the same time, when Duan Lingtian shifted his gaze to the soldiers, he discovered the soldiers' eyes that were initially devoid of life was now gleaming coldly with a green light. Once their eyes turned green, they came completely alive. Stomp, 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 comma. As soon as they came alive, the 1,000 soldiers began to move rapidly and even arranged themselves in an even neater formation. Everything was so natural, there was no need for anyone to command them. After they arranged themselves in a new formation, the 1,000 soldiers chanted loudly. The sound waves from their voices caused the air to tremble and formed ripples that began to spread out. Kill, kill, kill. At this moment, Duan Lingtian could only feel his eardrums trembling and the vital qi and blood in his body began to surge chaotically. However, he did not have time to pay attention to it. He noticed as the 1,000 soldiers repeatedly chanted, their eyes were locked on him. Now that 1,000 pairs of green eyes were locked on Duan Lingtian, he could not help but feel chills running up his spine even though he had been through many ups and downs. Kill! Another loud chant resonated in unison. Then, the 1,000 soldiers began to make their moves as they charged toward Duan Lingtian. Several hundred of cavalries galloped in the forefront as they pounded toward him. As for the infantries and gunmen, they were walking on air toward him. The sabers and guns in their hands were emitting vast true origins that traversed out in succession like a dragon coming out of its hole. Their target was Duan Lingtian. Several hundreds infantries, several hundreds of gunmen, several hundreds of sabers, and several hundreds of spears were all aimed at Duan Lingtian as they traveled across the air. The 1,000 soldiers' eyes were gleaming with green light so he could not see the changes in their eyes at all. However, judging from their current posture, it was clear they would not give up until he was dead. In just a while, the 1,000 soldiers surrounded him tightly and pounded at him. They're all at the peak of the pristine saint stage. At the same time, Duan Lingtian, who had activated his divine eye and extended his divine consciousness, quickly discovered the cultivation base of the soldiers. They were all at the peak of pristine saint stage. There was no exception. Initially, Duan Lingtian was not bothered when he discovered these soldiers were only at the peak of the pristine saint stage. However, after he had clashed directly using his colossal sword bell with the 30 soldiers who had joined forces, horror dawned on him immediately. How's this possible? I thought their cultivation base is only at the peak of the pristine saint stage. The colossal sword bell he had cast using all his strength had almost crumbled under the joint attack of the 30 over soldiers. If 10 more soldiers join in now, my colossal sword bell will shatter immediately. The moment Duan Lingtian thought of this, he began to panic a little when he realized he had underestimated his enemies. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath and moved to dodge the attack from the group of soldiers as he tried to calm down. After he calmed down, he began to study the 1,000 soldiers attacking him. He realized the movements of these soldiers appeared disorderly, but there seemed to be more to it than that. The formation they're in is not an ordinary formation. Their formation seems to be able to unite the strength of the comrades around them so that they could attack and retreat together. No wonder. I was thinking, how's it possible for the Abyssal Swamp's 8th trial, the penultimate trial, to be so easy? These 1,000 soldiers are much more troublesome than the clan of wild beasts from the first trial. Although the wild beasts from the first trial had great teamwork, they were not arranged in an orderly formation. The 1,000 soldiers before him, on the other hand, were only at the peak of the pristine saint stage, but every movement of theirs seemed to be underlined with some mystery. It was as though they were in sync with the comrades beside them. Due to the reason these soldiers were not sentient, there was no distrust at all between them. It was exactly because of this their joint attack was so terrifying. If the group of wild beasts in the first trial encounters these soldiers, I think it'll only take these soldiers a few attacks to kill all the wild beasts. Duan Lingtian was absolutely certain about this. At this moment, despite their cultivation base at the peak of the pristine saint stage, he did not dare to be reckless anymore, nor did he dare to look down on the group of soldiers. If there were 2,000 or even 3,000 martial cultivators at the peak of the pristine saint stage in a state of disunity, it would be easy for Duan Lingtian to deal with them. However, faced with these 1,000 soldiers who were united, he could only dodge them at this moment and look for an opening to attack. Calm down, Duan Lingtian knew very well he could only defeat the 1,000 soldiers if he maintained his composure. Not taking his former life into account, just in this life alone, he had carved a path for himself out of a secluded place on Cloud Continent. For this reason, his combat experience was definitely not something the younger generation native to the Dao Martial Saint Land could compare to. It was exactly because of this, faced with the 1,000 soldiers, he quickly found a way to deal with them. Calm down, kill them one by one. Naturally, the solution sounded simple. However, they were not as easy to execute. Time continued to pass by. Duan Lingtian's figure dodged the attack from the 1,000 soldiers as swift as the wind. He activated his strange pupil soundlessly to look for the weak point of these soldiers. Once he had found their weakness, he would make his move as fast as a bolt of lightning without giving them a chance to even retaliate. However, this was only possible because of Duan Lingtian's strength that was comparable to an early eminent saint stage martial cultivator due to his Sun true origin. Otherwise, it would be impossible for a martial cultivator at the peak of the refined saint stage to dodge at the right time every time the 1,000 soldiers attacked. Finally, after half an hour, Duan Lingtian discovered a weak spot in a standalone small formation. This small formation consisted of over 30 people. The attack Duan Lingtian had received earlier was from a small formation like this as well. Actually, the weakness of this small formation would not be obvious if it was not for the strange pupil that Duan Lingtian had activated. He would not have been able to discover it without the strange pupil. I'll make my move on you first. His eyes shone coldly. He was already furious from being unable to make a move for half an hour, dodging the attacks and being pursued. Now that he had found their weakness, he, naturally, would not let them go. Whoosh, 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 with a raise of his hand, the Sun true origin surged out and transformed into a 3-foot-long blade. The 3-foot-long blade gleamed with a golden light. From afar, it looked like the sun. At this moment, the sun was being grasped tightly in Duan Lingtian's hands. Whoosh, the weakness of the small formation continued to be magnified under the gaze of his strange pupil. The Sun true origin on his body surged out as well. Whoosh. Then, Duan Lingtian rushed into the small formation at an extremely swift speed, revealing himself in front of the 30 over soldiers in the small formation. His action, naturally, attracted the attention of the 30 over soldiers. He immediately became their target. Kill! The 30 over soldiers shouted in unison as they lifted their sabers and guns and charged out at lightning speed. Although they all came from different directions, it seemed as though they were striking from the same position. The attack of these 30 over soldiers seemed to be perfectly in sync due to some mysterious method. Duan Lingtian, who was in the middle of the small formation, did not even bat his eyes when faced with the attack of the 30 over soldiers. The 3-foot-long blade in his hand shone brilliantly and sword rays shot out swiftly, piercing through the place between the brows of one of the soldiers. This soldier was also the weak link he had noticed earlier. Spurt. As the sword rays flashed, a horrendous bloody hole appeared at the space between the soldier's brows. In the next instant, the gory scene he expected did not take place. Instead, the soldier who was pierced between his brows vanished along with the 7-foot-long spear in his hands. After killing one soldier, the force of the joint attack of the 30-over soldier was greatly diminished. Duan Lingtian cast his colossal sword bell and withstood the attack completely without feeling any pressure. Due to the death of that soldier, the remaining group of soldiers revealed even more of their weaknesses. Duan Lingtian did not even have to use his strange pupil to see some of these weaknesses. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. As the sounds of sword whistling in the air sounded, the remaining soldiers in the small formation vanished one by one under Duan Lingtian's sword. In the end, none of them was left at all. Chapter 1783. After annihilating the small formation, Duan Lingtian retreated in time and dodged the other big and small formations that were rushing over for support. Then, Duan Lingtian relied on the advantage his speed granted him and began to dodge the big and small formations. If he could not attack them, he would not give them a chance to touch him as well. His speed now was equivalent to an early eminent saint stage martial cultivator, so it was impossible for these soldiers to chase up to him. Under such circumstances, Duan Lingtian used the same method and defeated the remaining formations one by one. After a long time, he finally defeated all of them. I finally passed this trial. Although Duan Lingtian had successfully passed the 8th trial, he was drenched in sweat as well. His tensed mind finally relaxed as well. Earlier, when faced with the attacks from the big and small formations, he did not dare to let his mind wander, so he was constantly in a tensed state. Duan Lingtian bent down and placed his palms on his knees as he gasped heavily for air. Sweat dripped off his face like rain. He finally was able to catch his breath now. Ever since he entered the abyssal swamp, this was his first time being mentally and physically exhausted. For this reason, he decided to only continue to the next trial after resting for 1 day and 2 nights. However, after he had passed the 8th trial, the entrance to the 9th trial had opened immediately. After I've passed the first trial, the voice told me he would be waiting for me at the last trial. In other words, he'll wait for me at the 9th trial. Who's the owner of that voice exactly? Duan Lingtian was very curious. At the same time, he stepped into the entrance leading to the 9th trial. The entrance to the 9th trial was a halo. When Duan Lingtian entered it, it was as though he had triggered something, as the environment in his surroundings suddenly had an earth-shattering transformation. The vast underground palace vanished from his sight slowly that Duan Lingtian could see everything clearly. As expected, there the mirror image inside the illusory formation. I wonder what I'll face at the 9th trial. After the underground palace disappeared before his eyes, he was completely surrounded in white. Finally, after some time, Duan Lingtian realized he had emerged in a vast arena that was surrounded by rows and rows of spectator seats. However, nobody was there at all. Is this the 9th trial? Duan Lingtian looked at the arena below him in shock. Am I supposed to fight somebody? Since an arena had appeared, Duan Lingtian could also guess what kind of test awaited him in the 9th trial. An opponent would appear, and he would have to fight. Don't tell me it's the owner of that ancient voice. Even Duan Lingtian had no idea why such a thought suddenly emerged in his mind. The moment he thought about it, he could not dismiss the idea. This was because after he had passed the first trial, the voice had told him that after he had passed all 8 trials, he would be waiting for him at the final trial. Although I don't know who he is, I'm sure he's not an ordinary person, since he's able to transmit his voice to me in such a way. If my opponent turns out to be him, I'm afraid the odds are against me. The moment Duan Lingtian thought of this, he smiled wryly. Although his strength was equivalent to an early eminent saint stage martial cultivator now, it was still not enough if he encountered a mysterious and wise old man. Duan Lingtian still had a wry smile on his face when the air in front of him trembled and a crack appeared. Then, the mirror image of an old man walked out from the crack. He hovered in the air as he stood opposite Duan Lingtian. It was an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion. The loose long robe on his body was unable to conceal his sturdy body. The old man was nearly 2 meters tall. He appeared like a small tower as he stood there. At this moment, the old man was looking at Duan Lingtian with a smile. The eyes that seemed muddled initially soon gleamed brilliantly. Little fellow, you're not too bad for being able to reach here. As soon as Duan Lingtian saw the old man had already spoken. His voice was identical to the voice Duan Lingtian had heard previously. For this reason, Duan Lingtian was certain the old man was the owner of the voice that had spoken to him earlier. Senior, Duan Lingtian did not dare to be negligent in front of the old man. Although he might just be a mirror image inside the illusory formation, he was still worth being treated with respect. How could an old man who appeared here in the form of a mirror image be an ordinary person? However, the old man seemed to be a little stiff and unnatural. He did not have any reaction toward Duan Lingtian's bow of respect. Instead, he continued to talk. I told you earlier that I'll wait for you at the final trial, and now, you've finally arrived. If you can defeat me, my elementary devouring tactic will belong to you. If you can't defeat me, we'll just have to say you have no fate with my elementary devouring tactic. At this moment, Duan Lingtian also realized that although this old man appeared to be sentient, it seemed that it had been programmed to act a certain way. He could see this from how the old man seemed to have not noticed his bow of respect. The purpose of the old man's existence was to test him. He was not sentient and could not communicate with him at all. It was precisely because of this it was impossible for the old man to show him any mercy. Don't tell me the elementary devouring tactic he mentioned is actually the divine ability contained in the divine ability relic in the abyssal swamp. When Duan Lingtian recalled the second half of the old man's words, his breathing quickened. What was the reason for him to go through so many difficult trials in the first place? For the sake of the divine ability, of course. Moreover, the trials he faced were so difficult that it was completely unlike the previous divine ability relics he had found. For this reason, he was 100% certain the divine ability contained in this divine ability relic was not an ordinary one. Naturally, all these were only Duan Lingtian's assumption. Currently, he was completely unaware that the divine ability relic in the abyssal swamp was actually the most mysterious divine ability relic in the mystical Sky Mansion's St. Martial secret zone. It was also known as the number 1 divine ability relic. Although nobody in the history of the mystical Sky Mansion knew what kind of divine ability was contained in this divine ability relic, judging from the difficulty, the divine ability must not be simple. Due to this reason, it was given the title of the number 1 divine ability. Defeat him. When Duan Lingtian returned to his senses and looked at the old man again, he only felt that a bucket of cold water had been poured on him. It killed his enthusiasm immediately. Could he defeat this old man? Even if this old man was just a mirror image, he was not someone he could deal with. For a moment, Duan Lingtian's heart was filled with bitterness. He had just activated his divine eye to probe the old man, but when his divine consciousness touched the old man, it was like a stone being thrown into the sea. There was no effect at all. One could just imagine how profound and unfathomable the old man's cultivation base was. However, when the old man opened his mouth again, the bitterness in Duan Lingtian's heart vanished. I'll suppress my cultivation base and maintain it at the same level as yours. Your cultivation base is at the early refined saint stage. For this reason, I'll use the early refined saint stage cultivation base to battle with you. However, other than maintaining a cultivation base that's the same as yours, I'll also use the elementary devouring tactic. These were the old man's words. Early refined saint stage. Fight with the cultivation base at the early refined saint stage. Upon hearing the old man's words, Duan Lingtian was delighted. He was so excited he almost laughed out loud. Wait a minute, if he could cast the Sun True Origin, then his true strength would be equal to an early eminent saint stage martial cultivator as well. Along with the fact that he can cast the divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic, I won't be a match for him. The moment Duan Lingtian thought of this, the excitement that had just risen in his heart vanished without a trace. However, when he saw the true origin rising from the old man's body, a flame of hope appeared in his heart. This was because the true origin rising from the old man's body was not the Sun True Origin. It was only the ordinary true origin of an early refined saint stage martial cultivator. It would be impossible for an ordinary person to defeat an opponent with the same cultivation but has the advantage of the divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic. However, this is nothing to me at all. Duan Lingtian believed that even if the elementary devouring tactic the old man cast was a high-grade divine ability, the old man would be unable to defeat him since his strength was equivalent to an early eminent saint stage martial cultivator just by relying on his true origin at the early refined saint stage. His strength did not rely much on his cultivation base but on how extraordinary the Sun True Origin was. The Sun True Origin at the early refined saint stage was equivalent to the true origin of an early eminent saint stage powerhouse. The true origin of an ordinary early refined saint stage powerhouse would only be crushed if faced with the Sun True Origin of a powerhouse with the same cultivation base. Looks like this so-called last trial is going to be easy. Duan Lingtian's mood was very good. He originally thought the last trial would be very difficult, but who knew the situation would take a turn for the better. An ordinary person might have a headache if they reached here and met with such a situation, but Duan Lingtian was not worried at all. In fact, he felt inwardly delighted. Although his strength is a stage different from mine, he can still cast the elementary devouring tactic. The elementary devouring tactic is most likely a high-grade divine ability and might be even more powerful than an ordinary high-grade divine ability. For this reason, even if I have a 90% chance of winning this match, I can't be careless during this match at all. Duan Lingtian knew he could not afford to make even the smallest mistake since this was the 9th and final trial. For this reason, Duan Lingtian took this matter very seriously. He did not dare to underestimate his opponent at all. If he miserably failed such an easy task, who should he complain to then? After a while, the true origin on the old man's body surged up and spread out unreservedly. In just an instant, he began to make his move. His body swayed before he charged toward Duan Lingtian in a menacing manner. What a fast speed! Duan Lingtian was astonished. The speed the old man displayed was far faster than an ordinary early refined saint stage martial cultivator. In fact, he was not much slower than an intermediate refined saint stage martial cultivator. His movement technique is not ordinary. Duan Lingtian soon discovered this fact. Although the old man had already suppressed his cultivation base to the early refined saint stage, his technique was not something that an early refined saint stage martial cultivator was a match for. Chapter 1784. It was only natural. This old man was connected to the divine ability relic in the abyssal swamp, so how could he be ordinary? Even if such a person suppressed his cultivation base to his level, he still had his own advantage. The old man's combat experience and martial techniques were not something an ordinary early refined saint stage martial cultivator could compare to. Currently, Duan Lingtian counted himself lucky that the old man could not cast his Sun True Origin. In fact, it was thanks to the Sun True Origin that he had the strength equivalent to an early eminent saint stage martial cultivator that he managed to move forward with just his clone. In terms of strength, the Sun True Origin at the early refined saint stage was in no way inferior to an early eminent saint stage powerhouse's True Origin. It has increased again. When Duan Lingtian dodged the old man's attack in a timely manner, he was astonished to find that the old man had picked up speed again. Duan Lingtian extended his divine consciousness and was certain the old man's True Origin did not change at all. It was still an ordinary True Origin at the early refined saint stage. The reason its speed had increased was due to the old man's movement technique. It was an extremely light and rapid movement technique. Even the movement technique inside the heaven rank advanced saint grade martial tactic that's cultivated to the highest stage wouldn't be able to compare to this. Duan Lingtian clicked his tongue when faced with the old man's speed. Even an ordinary powerhouse at the intermediate refined saint stage would not be able to compare to the old man's current speed. If Duan Lingtian did not have the Sun True Origin and was only an ordinary early refined saint stage powerhouse, he would not have gained any advantage in terms of speed. The offensive technique the old man cast with a raise of his hand was extremely powerful as well. It was much more powerful than the attack of an ordinary intermediate refined saint stage martial cultivator. However, he was overpowered by Duan Lingtian in terms of strength. It was useless. No matter how powerful his attack was, it could not touch Duan Lingtian. Although Duan Lingtian's cultivation base was at the early refined saint stage, he possessed the Sun True Origin, so his speed was similar to the speed of an early eminent saint stage martial cultivator. Faced with the old man whose speed was at the intermediate refined saint stage, he did not feel any pressure at all. Fortunately, I'm the one who encounters this trial. If it's an ordinary martial or Dao cultivator who encounter this trial, it would have been impossible for them to pass this trial. Duan Lingtian knew very well that he was the only one capable of passing this trial easily. If it was another early refined saint stage martial cultivator, he would have been defeated long ago without the Sun True Origin. Why is he not moving? At the same time, Duan Lingtian realized that after the old man had chased him for some time, he suddenly came to a halt and looked at him in a slight daze before saying, "Little fellow, looks like you're the person I've been waiting for. If you can still defeat me after I cast the elementary devouring tactic, then I'll pass the elementary devouring tactic to you." Duan Lingtian did not pay much attention to the first half of the old man's words. However, when he reached the second half of his words, Duan Lingtian's eyes widened immediately. I'll pass the elementary devouring tactic to you. Did this old man mean the elementary devouring tactic was his divine ability? Could it be that this abyssal swamp was left behind by this senior? The moment he thought of this, Duan Lingtian's heartbeat increased by several beats. Although he had entered the location of 3 divine ability relics before, the 3 divine ability relics did not have anyone appearing like the old man, let alone communicating with him. However, not only did this old man appear in the abyssal swamp, but he even said he would pass the elementary devouring tactic to Duan Lingtian if Duan Lingtian was able to defeat him. How could these thoughts not fill his mind? When Duan Lingtian was beginning to indulge in his train of thought, he was shocked to discover that the Sun True Origin in his body had begun to leak out despite him not activating it. It was fortunate he had noticed it in time and had put a stop to it. Otherwise, he would have lost much of his Sun True Origin. After Duan Lingtian regained his senses, he realized the robe on the old man standing nearby had begun to flutter. The air in his surrounding began to stir and ripple before it transformed into a gigantic whirlpool. This whirlpool was devouring the heaven and earth spirit energy in the surrounding ceaselessly and storing it in the old man's body. His aura seems to be getting stronger now. At the same time, the divine consciousness that Duan Lingtian extended out could clearly sense the aura on the old man's body was continuing to increase. In the end, the air in the surrounding seemed to have stopped stirring. Only then did the old man's aura stop increasing. At the same time, the whirlpool that was shrouding him began to vanish as well. Whoosh! For a moment, the air began to shake as territory began to consolidate in a 100-meter radius around the old man. However, the true origin consolidating the true origin territory was not at the early refined saint stage. Instead, it was at the peak of the refined saint stage. Naturally, it was not comparable to the true origin of a real powerhouse at the peak of the refined saint stage since the true origin the old man used to consolidate his territory was very unstable. The reason it was unstable was due to it being forcefully raised. The true nature of the true origin was still at the early refined saint stage. This is the elementary devouring tactic. When Duan Lingtian saw this, he could not help but gasp. He was extremely shocked by this. The elementary devouring tactic allowed an early refined saint stage martial cultivator to devour the energy in the surrounding in a short period of time to forcefully raise his own true origin to the peak of the refined saint stage. This divine ability was just too heaven-defying, right? The old man's territory was a dark territory. Once in a while, some pythons that were shrouded in blood mist would leap out of the territory, but after writhing here and there, they would hide in the territory again. When Duan Lingtian looked at the surrounding, he could see there were about 1,000 pythons that appeared in the old man's territory. The 1,000 pythons were shrouded in a blood mist as they writhed in the territory. Sometimes, they would show themselves, but sometimes they would hide. It gave off a creepy vibe. Whoosh! When Duan Lingtian heard the sound of wind billowing, he realized the old man had begun to charge at him after he had consolidated his territory. The unstable true origin emitting from his body began to show signs of weakening at this point, although it was a slow process. Looks like the true origin that's raised using the elementary devouring tactic doesn't last too long. He wants to take advantage of his true origin at the peak of the refined saint stage to kill me with just one blow. The moment Duan Lingtian thought of this, he began to make his move as well. One must admit the speed that the old man demonstrated using his true origin at the peak of the refined saint stage was extremely fast. It was even faster than 99% of the martial cultivators at the peak of the refined saint stage. However, he still could not catch up to Duan Lingtian, whose cultivation base was equivalent to an early eminent saint stage martial cultivator. Although the old man's speed was equivalent to an intermediate refined saint stage martial cultivator with the true origin of an early refined saint stage powerhouse, his true origin that was at the peak of the refined saint stage was still unable to beat the speed of an early eminent saint stage martial cultivator. For example, the early refined saint stage and the intermediate refined saint stage, and the peak of the refined saint stage and the early eminent saint stage. The former was different because it was still in the same saint stage. The gap was not too wide. However, the latter's difference was huge since it was not in the same saint stage. The differences could not be compared at all. For this reason, although the old man had raised his true origin through the elementary devouring tactic to the peak of the refined saint stage in a short time, he still could not touch Duan Lingtian at all. Whoosh, 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 At this moment, the old man was, naturally, not fighting alone. He had the help of 1,000 pythons that were shrouded in blood mist in his territory. They quickly joined the battle and charged toward Duan Lingtian as well. Territory. Faced with the attack from the old man's territory, Duan Lingtian smiled nonchalantly as the sun true origin in his body began to surge out as well. 10,000 swords territory. Swish, 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 swish. The pythons were completely annihilated in the wake of the 10,000 sword rays. The old man's territory was subsequently shattered by the 10,000 swords territory. A territory relied on one's true origin. Duan Lingtian's true origin was the sun true origin. It was equivalent to the true origin of an early eminent saint stage powerhouse. Such a territory that was consolidated from such a true origin would undoubtedly crush the territory that was consolidated by the old man's true origin that was at the peak of the refined saint stage. It's getting weaker now. At the same time, Duan Lingtian noticed the true origin on the old man's body had weakened to the mastery refined saint stage. It's time to end this now. Duan Lingtian's eyes flashed as his heart jolted. His 10,000 swords territory converged abruptly. The 10,000 sword rays gathered in his hand and transformed into a heavy and big broadsword. From afar, it looked as dazzling as the sun. Duan Lingtian moved without any warning. He wielded the gigantic sword that was like a blazing sun dexterously. Faced with the old man who tried to cast his divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic, to raise his true origin to the peak of the refined saint stage again, the gigantic sword slashed downward and landed violently on him. The old man's true origin had just been raised to the peak of the refined saint stage again, but faced with the sun true origin and the strike from the sword that contained the profundity of the sovereign heart sword, it crumbled immediately. It vanished along with the old man's body before Duan Lingtian's eyes. I can't believe the last trial would be the easiest one. As Duan Lingtian's heart gave a jolt, the gigantic sword in his hand disappeared as well. At the same time, he soared up into the air as a faint smile appeared on his face. Indeed, ever since he entered the abyssal swamp, every step he had taken before he arrived at the 9th trial had been arduous. In Duan Lingtian's opinion, the 9th trial should be the most difficult one. However, when he was faced with it, although he appeared indifferent, he was actually feeling anxious. He wondered if he would be able to successfully pass the trial and obtain the divine ability in the divine ability relic that was located in the abyssal swamp. However, at this moment, he had finally passed the trial. Moreover, it was an easy trial that was to his advantage. Naturally, this was all because of the sun true origin in his body. If it was another person, it would be impossible for that person to pass this trial. This had already been mentioned many times. This abyssal swamp is really terrifying. However, that divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic, is even more terrifying. The moment Duan Lingtian recalled the elementary devouring tactic the old man had cast earlier, his eyes brightened. He could not suppress the excitement in his heart. Chapter 1785. At this moment, Duan Lingtian had passed all the trials in the abyssal swamp that contained the divine ability relic. This meant he would be able to obtain the divine ability in the abyssal swamp. The divine ability in the abyssal swamp was none other than elementary devouring tactic. Could it be that the elementary devouring tactic would be recorded on a stone tablet just like when I obtained the 6 harmonies golden body previously? The moment Duan Lingtian thought of this, he stared at the sky waiting for a crack to appear so that the stone tablet containing the divine ability would appear. However, after waiting for a long time, there was nothing at all. What's going on? Duan Lingtian was dumbfounded. He was completely clueless about what was happening. Where's that old fellow? Didn't he say he's going to pass that elementary devouring tactic to me after I defeat him? Is he toying with me? Duan Lingtian was really anxious now. It was to the point that he had changed the way he addressed the old man. He had addressed him as senior earlier, but now he referred to him as that old fellow. Old fellow, don't tell me you're going back on your words. Duan Lingtian shouted as looked around the surrounding as he stood above the arena. His voice was very loud. It contained the sun true origin and transformed his voice into sound waves that caused the air to stir. As the air stirred, Duan Lingtian could clearly see that a figure had appeared in the sky. It was the old man whom he had defeated earlier. He finally showed himself after making Duan Lingtian feel impatient. Little fellow, the old man smiled kindly. Congratulations on passing all the trials of the abyssal swamp. Now, I'll pass the information and everything about the elementary devouring tactic to you. By the time your cultivation base has risen to the Divine Saint stage, you'll be able to cultivate the elementary devouring tactic. Upon hearing the old man's words, Duan Lingtian's eyes lit up immediately. Although he knew the old man would not or could not respond to him, he still expressed his gratitude. Thank you, Senior. You've already seen the elementary devouring tactic during the final trial. I'm sure you already have some basic understanding of it. The elementary devouring tactic is a divine ability that can devour all forces from the surrounding. You can even devour your opponent's strength as well. Naturally, if your opponent is much more powerful than you won't be able to devour his strength since he'll be able to block the devouring force of the elementary devouring tactic, the old man added. Upon hearing that, Duan Lingtian's eyes gleamed as he recalled the scene earlier. Devouring my opponent's strength, I won't be able to devour it if the opponent is stronger. Block my devouring force. At this moment, Duan Lingtian finally understood. No wonder he felt the Sun true origin in his body leaking out earlier when the old man had cast the elementary devouring tactic. It had affected him as well. However, due to his strength that was comparable to an early eminent saint stage martial cultivator, the devouring force from the old man whose cultivation base was only at the early refined saint stage was limited and could not devour his Sun true origin. What a tyrannical divine ability! Duan Lingtian clicked his tongue. According to this senior's words, I'll be able to use the elementary devouring tactic to devour my opponents' energies when I fight with other people as long as their strength is not too much stronger than mine. Moreover, I'll also be able to use the energy I devour from them to strengthen my own strength. The moment he thought of this, he became excited again. For example, if two people who had almost identical technique and strength were to fight, if one of them cast the elementary devouring tactic to devour the energy from the surrounding and the opponent as well, just how scary would that be? At that time, the person who cast the elementary devouring tactic would definitely be able to easily defeat his opponent. Duan Lingtian, who had seen the force of the elementary devouring tactic, did not doubt this at all. When Duan Lingtian's thoughts were running wild thinking about the terrifying elementary devouring tactic, a barrage of information entered his mind in a timely manner. Initially, he instinctively rejected the barrage of information, but when he realized this was information about the elementary devouring tactic, he stopped resisting immediately and allowed it to enter his mind. The information was profound. Duan Lingtian tried to comprehend it, but he found it was too difficult for him to comprehend for now. Although he could not comprehend them now, it did not stop Duan Lingtian from memorizing and familiarizing himself with it. It was only natural that Duan Lingtian could only make speculations about it for now, even if he tried to understand and familiarize himself with it. It was still impossible for him to cast the divine ability with his current strength. An ordinary martial cultivator would have to break through to the divine saint stage before they could even try to comprehend and master the divine ability, but Duan Lingtian did not have to wait until he had broken through to the divine saint stage due to the Sun true origin in his body. Although he did not have to wait until he had broken through to the divine saint stage, he still needed to wait until he had broken through to the eminent saint stage. When his cultivation base had entered the eminent saint stage, only then his Sun true origin would be comparable to an ordinary early divine saint stage martial cultivator. At that time, he would be able to cast the divine ability. That's all. After an hour, Duan Lingtian realized the information had stopped transmitting into his mind, and all of the information about the high-grade divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic, had been fully memorized by him. When he first received this information, he had instinctively shut his eyes. Now that he had opened his eyes, he discovered the old man had already disappeared. Not only that, even the arena surrounded by the spectator seats had disappeared as well. Even the stars twinkling around the moon had disappeared. At this moment, he was back in the desert that was besieged by a sandstorm. The abyssal swamp had disappeared. Little fellow, I've already passed the elementary devouring tactic to you. From now on, the abyssal swamp and the legacy of the elementary devouring tactic will no longer exist in the Saint Martial secret zone. My name's Zhang Cheng. Perhaps, we'll be able to meet one day in the future. I'm looking forward to that. When Duan Lingtian saw the desert, the old man's voice resonated in his ears. After that, he no longer heard the old man's voice. The Saint Martial secret zone will no longer have the abyssal swamp and the elementary devouring tactic. Upon hearing the old man's words, Duan Lingtian could not return to his senses for a long time. As far as he knew, the various divine ability relics in the mystical Sky Mansion's Saint Martial secret zone would mostly appear again. Once somebody had obtained the divine ability, it might appear again in another place. However, he had never heard of a divine ability relic that would completely vanish for good after the divine ability had been obtained. Nonetheless, it was impossible for the owner of that voice to lie to him. If this is the case, does this mean the elementary devouring tactic legacy would be lost to the mystical sky mansion from now on? The moment Duan Lingtian thought of this, he smiled wryly. Although it was not an easy task to obtain the elementary devouring tactic legacy since it was not possible for just anyone to pass all 9 trials of the abyssal swamp, the moment he thought of how this divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic, would be lost to the mystical sky mansion after he had obtained it, he could not help but feel a little guilty. Looks like I owe a huge favor to the mystical sky mansion, Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Just let it be, when I've broken through to the divine saint stage and master the elementary devouring tactic, I'll just pass the elementary devouring tactic to a suitable mystical sky mansion's disciple. At that time, it can be considered as me repaying my debt to the mystical sky mansion. Duan Lingtian sighed in relief once he made up his mind. Whether it was in his past life or current life, he did not like owing favors the most. As the saying went, a debt of gratitude is the hardest to return. Currently, Duan Lingtian was still unaware that it was not easy at all to pass the trials of the abyssal swamp that housed the divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic. It could be considered as an elite ability in the entire Dao Martial Saint land. The saying, ignorance is bliss, suited Duan Lingtian perfectly at this moment. No matter what, it was still a joyous occasion being able to obtain a divine ability such as the elementary devouring tactic. Currently, it has been 2 months since I entered the Saint Martial Secret Zone. There's only a month left before I'll be forcefully sent out by the Saint Martial Secret Zone. Only 1 month left, I must find them as soon as possible. Duan Lingtian was obviously referring to Wang Feizan and Lu Jian. Before they entered the Saint Martial Secret Zone, they had already formed a little team and promised to work together. However, after they entered the Saint Martial Secret Zone, Duan Lingtian did not encounter them at all throughout his journey. Now, even if I discover a divine ability, I shouldn't explore it yet for the time being, I must find them first. It was mentioned earlier that Duan Lingtian disliked owing people favors the most. Therefore, he really hoped to return the favor to Lu Hongguang, the second elder of the Raging Wave Mansion, inside the Saint Martial Secret Zone. It could be considered as him repaying Lu Hongguang's favor once he helped Lu Jian obtain a divine ability. 5 days later, Duan Lingtian discovered the location of another divine ability relic. However, he was not in a hurry to explore it. What was more important was to look for Wang Feizan and Lu Jian. In the end, Duan Lingtian managed to meet Wang Feizan 8 days later. When he found her, she was all alone. Before Wang Feizan discovered Duan Lingtian, he had already appeared by her side and asked, "You didn't see Lu Jian as well?" Duan Lingtian's sudden appearance had shocked Wang Feizan. After she regained her senses, she replied, "I finally found you." As for Lu Jian, Wang Feizan smiled wryly. "I met him a few days ago, but he was eliminated yesterday." "He has already been eliminated." Duan Lingtian frowned. Now that Lu Jian was eliminated, would he not lose the opportunity to return Lu Hongguang's favor? When Wang Feizan saw him frowning, she seemed to be able to guess what he was thinking. She said, "Don't worry, I've already helped you return the favor that your senior brother owed Lu Jian's senior. I entered the location of a divine ability relic with him a few days ago and abided by the rule you set before we came here. I gave him first priority to memorize the first divine ability in the relic we encountered." Wang Feizan's words shocked Duan Lingtian greatly. "But, that's on the premise that I'm with both of you." Duan Lingtian looked at Wang Feizan with a complex look. "When I'm not around, you don't have to abide by the rule that I set before we came in." Chapter 1786. Although Duan Lingtian did not verbally thank Wang Feizan, he still felt thankful toward her. "Stop talking." Wang Feizan waved her hand and domineeringly interrupted Duan Lingtian. "No matter what, I've already helped you return the favor, so you owe me a favor now." "Naturally, I'll return you your favor." Duan Lingtian smiled. "I found a divine ability relic 3 days ago. Let's go there. The divine ability contained in the divine ability relics belongs to you." "What a coincidence. I have some clues leading to a divine ability relic as well." Wang Feizan smiled. "Oh." Duan Lingtian was slightly taken aback. He did not expect Wang Feizan to have clues leading to another divine ability relic as well after helping Lu Jian obtain one divine ability. Speaking of, Lu Jian was killed at the location of that divine ability relic as well. That divine ability relic is much more dangerous than the one we entered previously. Based on how dangerous it is, I'm sure the divine ability contained in the divine ability relic has to be extraordinary, Wang Feizan said. Duan Lingtian agreed with Wang Feizan's words. As someone with experience, he, naturally, knew this. Similar to the divine ability relic in the abyssal swamp he had encountered earlier. There was a total of 9 trials. Apart from some of the trials, most of the trials were ridiculously dangerous. Although the trials to obtain the divine ability relic was difficult, the reward was extraordinary. There was no doubt the elementary devouring tactic was a high-grade divine ability. Moreover, Duan Lingtian suspected that the elementary devouring tactic was also most likely one of the top-rated ones among all the other high-grade divine abilities. Currently, Duan Lingtian was still unaware that the elementary devouring tactic was widely known as the #1 divine ability in the St. Martial secret zone by powerhouses of every generation in the mystical Sky Mansion. If he knew about this, he would not have made assumptions of his own. Where is the divine ability relic you found? Let's go to the nearest one first, Wang Feizan suggested. Duan Lingtian did not have any objections to her suggestion. After both of them exchanged information for a while, they discovered the divine ability relic Wang Feizan had found was nearer. Due to this reason, both of them decided to make their way there first. What grade is the divine ability that you helped Lu Jian obtain? Duan Lingtian asked. It must be a medium-grade divine ability. Half of the reason I managed to pass the final test was due to luck, Wang Feizan replied. Lu Jian's luck is indeed not bad, Duan Lingtian nodded before he said, however, the location of the divine ability relic we're heading to now must be more difficult than the divine ability both of you found earlier, right? Duan Lingtian asked casually although he already knew the answer in his heart. After all, Lu Jian was eliminated inside. After he was eliminated, Wang Feizan had also left the divine ability relic behind. It was apparent she was not confident she could pass all the trials to obtain the divine ability relic. Yes, Wang Feizan nodded. What grade do you think that divine ability relic is? Duan Lingtian asked. Wang Feizan glanced at him before answering honestly, even if the divine ability contained inside the divine ability relic is not a high-grade one, it'll definitely be an elite medium-grade divine ability. Then I guess both of you are quite lucky to encounter 2 good divine ability relics. Duan Lingtian smiled. Suddenly, as though he was hit by a pang of realization, he said bluntly, as the saying goes, even among brothers, debts should be dealt with without any ambiguity. We should also plan on how we'll divide the divine ability relics we encounter in the future. How about this? The divine ability relic you found is yours, and the divine ability relic I found 3 days ago is mine. Wang Feizan did not reply Duan Lingtian in a hurry. Instead, she asked, have you entered the location of the divine ability relic you discovered? What, are you worried the divine ability contained in the divine ability relic has a higher grade than the divine ability contained in the divine ability relic you found? Upon hearing her words, Duan Lingtian, naturally, knew what she was thinking. He chuckled. Do you want to switch? Colors appeared on Wang Feizan's cheeks immediately since her thoughts were seen through by Duan Lingtian. Let's switch then, I'm not afraid. It's alright, let's not switch yet. To be honest, I've not entered the location of the divine ability relic I found so I don't know what the situation is like inside. Let's do it this way. You can have the divine ability relic you found. When we head inside the location of the divine ability relic I found, I'll give the divine ability relic to you if you find it to your liking. However, the next 2 divine ability relics we encounter will belong to me. What do you think? Duan Lingtian said. At this moment, Wang Feizan also realized that Duan Lingtian really did not know anything about the situation inside the location of the divine ability relic he found. Otherwise, he would not have said such words. Based on his words, she could tell he was thinking on her behalf. She immediately replied with burning cheeks, let's just go with your initial suggestion. The divine ability relic I found is mine, and the one you found is yours. As for the other divine abilities we encounter after that, we'll take turns with it. That's also possible, Duan Lingtian nodded. Then, under Wang Feizan's guidance, Duan Lingtian began to make his way to the location of the divine ability relic where Lu Jian was eliminated. One had to admit Wang Feizan was indeed lucky. Although the trials inside the divine ability relic was not as ridiculous as the abyssal swamp, it was still much more difficult than the 6 Harmonies Tower and 6 Halls Palace that he had entered previously. Looks like the divine ability contained inside this divine ability relic is an elite medium-grade divine ability if it's not a high-grade divine ability. It's just like you said earlier, Duan Lingtian said to Wang Feizan after passing a few trials. From the beginning until the end, Wang Feizan did not do anything at all apart from following by Duan Lingtian's side. She did not have the opportunity to do anything at all. Every time they encountered danger, Duan Lingtian would immediately discover it and deal with it in a timely manner. Even if it's a high-grade divine ability, I think it's just a bottom-tier high-grade divine ability, Wang Feizan remarked. What, you're still complaining? Do you want to switch then? Duan Lingtian teased her with a smile. I don't have any objection if you want to switch, Wang Feizan replied bluntly. It's alright, I don't want to take advantage of you. If the divine ability relic I found is only a low-grade divine ability relic, I'm afraid you'll have no shoulders to cry on later. Duan Lingtian shook his head. After he had discovered the location of the divine ability relic, he did not explore it. For this reason, he was also not certain what grade the divine ability relic was. Lu Jian was killed at the next trial. At that time, I couldn't even fend for myself, so I couldn't save him at all, Wang Feizan remarked. Alright, Duan Lingtian nodded. After he learned that Wang Feizan had helped him return a favor on his behalf, he had already come to terms with it. What he needed to do now was to repay Wang Feizan instead. Soon after, they encountered the next trial. The test that was extremely difficult for Wang Feizan was extremely easy for Duan Lingtian. It took him less than 20 breaths to pass the trial. Wang Feizan was struck dumb, and her mouth was agape. Wang Feizan looked at Duan Lingtian's silhouette as she muttered to herself, his strength is most likely very strong among all the martial cultivators at the peak of the refined saint stage. They continued to pass the trials before they finally arrived at the final trial. The person in charge of the last trial was a skimpily dressed sexy and beautiful woman. Each of her movements was seductive and charming. Wang Feizan's expression turned solemn immediately when she saw the woman's movement and her power at the peak of the refined saint stage. However, when she saw the woman displayed a movement divine ability that was extremely brilliant, to the point that it granted her the speed close to an eminent saint stage powerhouse, horror dawned on her immediately as unwillingness filled her heart. Don't tell me that I, Wang Feizan, have no fate with the divine ability inside this divine ability relic. At this moment, she did not feel very confident although she had Duan Lingtian by her side. Perhaps, Duan Lingtian's ability was not inferior to his opponent, but the woman's speed was extremely fast. It was so fast that it was almost comparable to the speed of an eminent saint stage powerhouse due to the divine ability. How fast? When Duan Lingtian saw the woman's speed, he was taken aback as well. Her speed was not that much inferior to his speed. His speed was already equivalent to the speed of an early eminent saint stage powerhouse. Wang Feizan decided to leave with Duan Lingtian despite the unwillingness in her heart. She took a deep breath before she said, Lingtian, just let it be if you can't, let's leave this place. She was afraid that they would not be able to leave if they stayed any longer. However, soon after, she discovered that Duan Lingtian seemed to have ignored her words. She instinctively turned to look at Duan Lingtian only to discover he had vanished from his spot. Swish, 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 the swift sound of wind whistling in the air sounded and caused the air to stir before the sound of air explosion reverberated in the air continuously. At this moment, Wang Feizan discovered that Duan Lingtian was already facing the woman directly. Most importantly, she discovered that he was not at a disadvantage at all when faced with that woman. The woman moved, and a few afterimages appeared in front of her. Eventually, she took it a step further as she charged forward. It was as though there were thousands of afterimages. One could just imagine how fast her speed was. However, to Wang Feizan's surprise, Duan Lingtian still did not fall into a disadvantageous position faced with the woman's enhanced speed. How fast? At this moment, Duan Lingtian was even more surprised. This was because he just discovered the woman who was at the peak of the refined saint stage had just displayed speed that was equivalent to an early eminent saint stage powerhouse. The woman was no longer inferior to him in terms of speed. Her true origin is still at the peak of the refined saint stage. The reason her speed is so fast is all due to the movement divine ability. This movement divine ability is most likely a high-grade divine ability, and the divine ability contained in the divine ability relic should be the movement divine ability she's currently using. Duan Lingtian's heart jolted as he followed behind the woman like a shadow as he began to piece the puzzle together. Chapter 1787. If Duan Lingtian and the woman were outside, with their speed that was equal, perhaps, he might not have been able to catch up to her. However, they were both currently in a narrow space. Naturally, it was not really narrow. It was only narrow if compared to the boundless space outside. It was exactly because of this Duan Lingtian easily found a chance to corner the woman. The woman's speed was on par with him. However, in regards to strength, she was far from being comparable to Duan Lingtian. The reason her speed was so fast was all due to the high-grade movement divine ability. Due to this reason, it was easy for Duan Lingtian to kill her in such a situation. She evaporated very quickly after she was killed. When Wang Feizan saw the scene before her, she was dumbfounded. After a long while, she finally looked at Duan Lingtian as she said, "What a ruthless method. What, do you want me to let her go?" Duan Lingtian retorted as he smiled nonchalantly. Subsequently, the air began to stir, and a crack appeared in the air before a gigantic stone tablet flew out and landed on the ground. He looked at Wang Feizan and urged her, "Go on. It's time for us to head to the next destination after you're done memorizing this divine ability. If I'm not mistaken, it should be a high-grade movement divine ability." High-grade movement divine ability. Upon hearing his words, Wang Feizan was reminded of the speed the woman had displayed earlier. It was obvious the woman's speed was incompatible with her strength. At that time, she had also suspected the woman had cast a movement divine ability. After she heard Duan Lingtian's words, she realized the divine ability she was about to obtain was most like the same one the woman had cast earlier. When Wang Feizan extended her divine consciousness into the stone tablet, the information about the divine ability contained in it surged into her mind. Movement divine ability, the 1,000 illusory shadows. At this moment, she also learned the name of the divine ability she was about to obtain. She became even more excited as she continued memorizing the information. She discovered this movement divine ability, the 1,000 illusory shadows, was indeed a high-grade divine ability. Moreover, the divine ability was cultivated by a woman. This would allow her to yield twice the result with half the effort. This was a movement divine ability that was tailored for a woman. In other words, after she had broken through to the divine saint stage in the future, comprehending and mastering this divine ability would be easier for her than an ordinary divine ability since she was a woman. Naturally, this did not mean this divine ability could only be cultivated by a woman. It was just that if women cultivated it, they would yield twice the result with only half the effort. If a male cultivated it, he would only yield half the result with twice the effort. As an intermediate refined saint stage martial cultivator, it only took Wang Feizan a day and a night to memorize the information about the 1,000 illusory shadows on the stone tablet. She only needed to wait until she had broken through to the divine saint stage in the future to comprehend and master its profundity with all her might in order to cast it in the future. The scene before Duan Lingtian's eyes flickered for a moment before he discovered he had returned to the place before he entered the location of the divine ability relic. He was not surprised by this since he had already experienced similar situations multiple times. Let's go. Since they had already come out, Wang Feizan must have already memorized the divine ability. For this reason, the first thing Duan Lingtian did was to call out to her to leave and head to the location of the divine ability relic that he had discovered. At this moment, only 20 days remained until they would be forcefully sent out of the Saint Martial secret zone. It would depend on their luck how many divine ability relics they would be able to find in these 20 days. Naturally, apart from luck, efficiency played a vital role as well. For this reason, Duan Lingtian did not waste any time and instantly urged Wang Feizan to leave as soon as she regained her senses. Whoosh, whoosh, Duan Lingtian was in the lead as Wang Feizan followed closely behind him. The latter flew as fast as she could while the former intentionally slowed down in consideration of the latter. Wang Feizan's gaze was extremely complex when she stared at Duan Lingtian's back as she followed behind him. It's obvious the speed he displayed earlier has surpassed the speed of a powerhouse at the peak of the refined saint stage. His speed is already on par with an early eminent saint stage powerhouse. As the young miss from a fourth-rate force, the tyrannic saber mansion, naturally, her experience was not limited. She had seen the speed of many early eminent saint stage powerhouses before. For this reason, she was almost certain when Duan Lingtian was helping her to pass the final trial to obtain the divine ability relic earlier, the speed he displayed was on par with an early eminent saint stage powerhouse. Although the woman's cultivation base was only at the peak of the refined saint stage, her speed was extremely fast when she cast the 1,000 illusory shadows. Her speed was comparable to the speed of an early eminent saint stage powerhouse. However, under such circumstances, he was still able to kill her. It must be because his speed is not inferior to hers. Wang Feizan muttered to herself as her unfocused gaze zeroed in on Duan Lingtian. Don't tell me he has broken through again, and he's an early eminent saint stage powerhouse now. Her heartbeat quickened when she thought about this. Wait a minute. However, Wang Feizan soon felt that it was not possible for the fellow in front of her to have made another breakthrough since he had just broken through to the peak of the refined saint stage not too long ago. At that time, it had caused a commotion not only in the Heaven Palace but the entire mystical sky mansion. No matter how monstrous or how ridiculously high his innate talent is, it's still impossible for him to break through 2 stages from the Master Refined Saint stage in such a short period of time. But, if he hasn't made a breakthrough, why is his speed so fast? Wang Feizan was utterly baffled. In the end, she could not help but ask, why you have already broken through to the eminent saint stage, right? Are you talking to me? Duan Lingtian turned around and looked at her. Of course, there are only the 2 of us here. Did you think I was talking to myself? Wang Feizan retorted. Her grave expression eased up slightly as soon as he spoke. No, when Duan Lingtian learned the question was meant for him, he shook his head. I haven't broken through to the eminent saint stage yet. How much he wished that he had broken through to the eminent saint stage so that he could comprehend, cultivate, and master the various divine abilities he had obtained. You haven't broken through to the eminent saint stage, but your speed is at the early eminent saint stage. Wang Feizan glared at him. How did you do it? Will you believe me if I tell you that I've already mastered a movement divine ability? Duan Lingtian asked with a smile. Tisk. Wang Feizan glanced at him as she said scornfully, do you think I'm only 3 years old? You haven't broken through to the divine saint stage, but you've already mastered a divine ability. What a joke. Duan Lingtian only smiled and no longer gave an explanation. He was deceiving her anyway. The reason his speed was at the early eminent saint stage was mainly due to his Sun True Origin. However, the Sun True Origin was undoubtedly a huge secret. Not only did it involve Elder Huo, but it also involved the Celestial Supreme Treasure, the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda in his possession. I haven't searched for any materials to repair the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda for a long time now. After I leave the Saint Martial secret zone, I'll borrow the mystical sky mansion's force to search for the materials needed to repair the 4th level of the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda as soon as I can. The moment Duan Lingtian thought of the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda, he immediately made up his mind. To him, repairing the 4th level of the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda was something very important. This was because the cultivation environment would better. Apart from that, according to Elder Huo, the time spent in the 4th level of the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda would be even slower than the 3rd level. 8 days inside the 4th level of the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda would only equal to a day outside. It was much more efficient than the 3rd level of the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda. Naturally, this was not the biggest benefit. Once the 4th level of the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda was fully repaired, he would be able to safeguard his life further when faced with danger since he could enter the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda to escape. In Duan Lingtian's opinion, this was a bigger benefit than the former. A person only had 1 life, and this rule applied to Duan Lingtian as well. This was why he valued his life so much. In other words, he was afraid of death. Apart from a few true crazy people in this world, was there anyone who was not afraid of death? As one's cultivation base and strength increased, this would also mean one had sacrificed more as well. For this reason, one would undoubtedly value one's own life. However, this did not mean Duan Lingtian valued his own life above everything else. If it was him in his past life, perhaps, he would value his life the most. However, in this current life, it was no longer the case. In this current life, he had family and friends. These people were more than worthy for him to sacrifice his life for them. There was no doubt the Sun True Origin in Duan Lingtian's body was one of his biggest secrets. He did not plan to explain further, so he looked at Wang Feizan and changed the topic. He asked, the divine ability you obtained must be the movement divine ability the woman had cast earlier, right? That's right. A smile appeared on Wang Feizan's face immediately when she heard Duan Lingtian mentioning the divine ability she obtained. The divine ability I obtained is the movement divine ability the woman had cast. What's it called? Duan Lingtian asked curiously. The 1,000 illusory shadows, Wang Feizan answered. The 1,000 illusory shadows? Duan Lingtian raised an eyebrow as he recalled the battle between him and the woman. He remembered the afterimages that appeared when the woman made her move. That movement divine ability does indeed live up to its name. After a long while, Duan Lingtian brought Wang Feizan to the location of the divine ability relic that he had discovered. Before they entered, Wang Feizan looked at Duan Lingtian and asked, "What grade do you think the divine ability contained in this divine ability relic is?" "I have no idea." Duan Lingtian shook his head. "If you really haven't yet explored it, I think it has to be a low-grade divine ability," Wang Feizan teased him as she cheekily batted her eyelashes. "Please don't jinx it. The divine ability here belongs to me, you know." Duan Lingtian glared at her. Somehow, he had become much more casual with Wang Feizan. It was as though both of them were old friends. Chapter 1788. Duan Lingtian and Wang Feizan entered the location of the divine ability relic that Duan Lingtian discovered a few days earlier. With just a raise of her hand, Wang Feizan had already killed a few wild beasts during the first trial. They were merely a few early pristine saint stage wild beasts. Looks like I was right. Although they were only at the first trial now, they could already tell from the difficulty of the first trial that the divine ability contained in the divine ability relic was not something worth looking forward to. "You're a jinx." Duan Lingtian rolled his eyes at Wang Feizan. Naturally, he did not really blame her. After all, even if she did not say such words, it would not have changed the fact that the divine ability was a low-grade one. The few trials ahead were also easily dealt with by Wang Feizan. From the beginning until the end, Duan Lingtian did not make a move at all. It was just as they had speculated during their journey here, the divine ability contained in this divine ability relic was indeed just a useless low-grade divine ability. Although it was not to Duan Lingtian's liking, he still memorized it anyway. It did not take them more than 2 days to exit the location of the divine ability relic. As Duan Lingtian and Wang Feixian searched for another divine ability relic, Wang Feizan smiled mockingly as she said to Duan Lingtian, "I think the divine ability relic we'll encounter next will be a medium or high-grade divine ability. The divine ability contained in the next divine ability belonged to her." "You're thinking too much," Duan Lingtian snapped at her. "I think the next divine ability relic will contain a useless low-grade divine ability like the one we just encountered." "What, are you trying to see who's able to guess correctly? What, don't forget that I was right about your divine ability relic, humph. The next divine ability relic won't be able a low-grade divine ability relic." Wang Feizan snorted. It was obvious she was joking around with Duan Lingtian. 3 days later, both of them found another divine ability relic. As it turned out, Wang Feizan could only guess correctly once but not twice. The divine ability relic was also a low-grade divine ability relic. Jinx. You jinx. Throughout the journey, Wang Feizan could not help but curse Duan Lingtian whenever she saw him, rendering him speechless. It was just like the saying, only women and small-minded men are hard to deal with. Had she forgotten she was the one who had cursed him first? After Wang Feizan obtained the low-grade divine ability contained in the divine ability relic, both of them continued to search for their next target. As they were traveling, Duan Lingtian quickly warned Wang Feizan when he saw she was about to say something again. "I'm warning you, don't even think of obtaining any more medium-grade divine abilities if you dare to curse me again, let alone a high-grade divine ability." When Wang Feizan recalled the losses that both sides had suffered, she shut her mouth immediately. However, she could not help but glare fiercely at Duan Lingtian. As the saying went, a job would be easy to complete if both sexes worked together. Only a day had gone by, but both of them discovered the entrance to another divine ability relic. According to the rules of their alliance, this divine ability relic would go to Duan Lingtian. "I hope the divine ability inside this divine ability relic is an offensive divine ability that's at the medium grade or above," Duan Lingtian thought to himself after they entered the location of the divine ability relic. In the Tao martial saint land, the divine ability relic was similar to the martial techniques but they were different from martial arts. The divine ability could only be cast under the condition that the martial techniques were cast first. Both of their effects would boost each other. For this reason, if Duan Lingtian managed to obtain an offensive divine ability, his strength would be further enhanced once he had broken through to the eminent saint stage. He could only cultivate the divine ability after breaking through to the eminent saint stage. Currently, he had 3 good divine abilities in his possession. The 6 Harmonies Golden Body was a defensive divine ability, the Elementary Devouring Tactic was an assist divine ability, and the Golden Crow's Wings was a movement divine ability. Among the 3 divine abilities, the 6 Harmonies Golden Body had the lowest grade. It was a medium-grade divine ability. As for the other 2 divine abilities, he did not know which one had a higher grade. He would find out once he returned to his original body and speak to Elder Huo inside the 7 Treasures Exquisite Pagoda. However, he still subconsciously felt the Golden Crow's Wings was of slightly higher grade. After all, that was Elder Huo's bloodline divine ability as a 3-legged Golden Crow. Naturally, even if he could cultivate the Golden Crow's Wings that Elder Huo had taught him to the highest stage, it still would not be comparable to the Golden Crow's Wings that Elder Huo cast. This was because it was Elder Huo's bloodline divine ability. It was only natural that the Golden Crow's Wing he cast would be stronger. Even then, it was still a divine ability that did not belong to any mundane planet. For this reason, Duan Lingtian subconsciously felt that the Golden Crow's Wings was the most powerful among the 3 divine abilities that he found useful. Naturally, he was not certain. This was merely his speculation. He had a feeling the Elementary Devouring Tactic was not simple as well. I can only know for certain after I leave the Saint Martial Secret Zone and speak to Elder Huo. When Duan Lingtian thought of this, he no longer bothered with thinking about this matter. The current problem was he still lacked an offensive divine ability. Although he had inherited the Sword Saint Feng Qingyang's Supreme Sword Dao mental cultivation method, the Sovereign Heart Sword still belonged in the martial arts domain to a certain extent. The technique he cast using the Sovereign Heart Sword stages would also belong in the martial arts domain. It would be able to fight with other martial arts but not divine abilities. It would be even better if it's a sword-type offensive divine ability. Duan Lingtian continued to daydream in his heart. It was fortunate Wang Feizan could not read his mind. Otherwise, she would have burst out laughing at him for daydreaming. Soon after, Duan Lingtian and Wang Feizan went through the first trial to obtain the divine ability relic. Duan Lingtian's expression turned grim immediately after he killed the wild beasts from the first trial. Wang Feizan's face, on the other hand, had turned red. After a while, she could no longer hold back and burst out laughing. "Don't blame me for this. I didn't curse you this time around." From the first trial, they could tell the divine ability contained in this divine ability relic had to be another low-grade divine ability relic. As it turned, they were right. During their journey to search for the next divine ability relic, Wang Feizan claimed confidently, "Just you watch. The divine ability in the next divine ability relic won't be a low-grade one." Fingers crossed. Duan Lingtian nodded and did not tease her. His bad mood that was caused by encountering a second low-grade divine ability had also vanished. "Don't worry, I'm sure when it's your turn, the divine ability contained in the divine ability relic won't be a low-grade divine ability relic." Wang Feizan felt a little unused to Duan Lingtian not arguing with her. "Whatever will be, Duan Lingtian replied indifferently with a smile. "Hey, are you okay?" Wang Feizan came to a halt and studied him solemnly. "How can I not be okay? Let's go." Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled. Although he was desperate to obtain an offensive divine ability, he was no longer desperate after obtaining the low-grade divine ability earlier. It was not because the low-grade divine ability had some unique ability. It was just that he realized how greedy he had become. In the Dao Martial Saint Land, the 6 Harmonies Golden Body that he obtained was considered not bad. It was a medium-grade divine ability. However, the other divine ability, the Elementary Devouring Tactic, that he obtained was not only a high-grade divine ability. It was a one-of-kind high-grade divine ability inside the Saint Martial Secret Zone. At the very least, it was one-of-kind in the Mystical Sky Mansion's Saint Martial Secret Zone. The moment Duan Lingtian thought of this, he finally came to terms with it. As the saying went, a contented mind is a perpetual feast. Even if he could not obtain any more useful divine abilities, he had reaped a huge benefit from the Saint Martial Secret Zone. Due to this mindset, he managed to regain his calm. Naturally, Wang Feizan was unaware of the change in Duan Lingtian's thoughts, so she did not know the reason for his sudden change in behavior. One must admit that Wang Feizan was indeed lucky. 2 days later, both of them soon discovered another divine ability relic. The trials to obtain the divine ability relic were not inferior to the various trials in the 6 Harmonies Tower and 6 Halls Palace that Duan Lingtian had been to previously. The divine ability contained inside was a defensive divine ability like the divine ability recorded in the 6 Harmonies Tower and 6 Halls Palace. Although this defensive divine ability was medium grade, it was slightly inferior to the defensive divine ability 6 Harmonies Golden Body that Duan Lingtian had obtained previously. Naturally, the difference was not too wide. Now that Wang Feizan had obtained a high grade and a medium grade divine abilities, she was beside herself with joy. Let's go. Let's search for another divine ability relic. Soon after, they found another divine ability relic. This divine ability relic belonged to Duan Lingtian. However, it was still a low-grade divine ability. Duan Lingtian was not too surprised by this, but Wang Feizan, on the other hand, felt a little apologetic. Should we switch the rules? All the low-grade divine abilities we encounter after this will belong to me until we come across a medium-grade divine ability. You can have that medium-grade divine ability then. Even Wang Feizan could not stand to watch Duan Lingtian's bad luck anymore. She was really worried he would encounter another low-grade divine ability after she had obtained her third divine ability that was at the medium grade. There's no need for that. Duan Lingtian rejected her good intention immediately due to the change in his mindset. Come on, why are you being so stubborn? Wang Feizan was unhappy due to his rejection. Do you think you're protecting ego by rejecting me? Do you think your so-called ego is actually more important than your future? In fact, sometimes, a divine ability that's at the medium grade or above can change your future, you know. Duan Lingtian felt a sense of warmth in his heart when he heard Wang Feizan's words. At the same time, he could not help but smile as he asked, could it be that you think I've not obtained any divine abilities at the medium grade or above before I met you? Chapter 1789. Wang Feizan was stunned when she heard Duan Lingtian's words. Indeed, when she met him, he had already been in the Saint Martial secret zone for about 2 months. It was almost impossible for him to not obtain any divine ability relics with his strength. In fact, most of the divine ability relics they found was discovered by Duan Lingtian. There was even one moment when she thought of ripping his eyes out just to see how different they were. Why were they able to detect divine ability relics so easily? Humph, since you don't appreciate my good intentions, there's nothing for me to say anymore. Wang Feizan snorted and no longer said anything. However, she could not help but think to herself, I want to see regretful expression later if the divine ability contained in the next divine ability relic is another medium grade or higher divine ability. The divine ability contained in the next divine ability relic belonged to Wang Feizan. Perhaps, she was really lucky. The divine ability contained in the next divine ability relic was indeed a medium grade divine ability. Not only that, it was an offensive divine ability that was known as the Deadly Flowers. What, are you feeling regretful now? Wang Feizan asked Duan Lingtian after she memorized the divine ability. There's nothing for me to regret. Duan Lingtian smiled nonchalantly. Perhaps, the former him might have felt regretful thinking why the offensive divine ability did not belong to him. However, his mindset had changed, and he had already come to terms with things. The divine ability contained in the next divine ability relic belonged to Duan Lingtian. Perhaps, he had really bad luck because it was another low-grade divine ability relic. The divine ability contained in the next divine ability relic belonged to Wang Feizan. This time, her luck was not so good either since she also obtained a low-grade divine ability. When they encountered another divine ability relic and entered it, Wang Feizan remarked, I think this will be the last divine ability relic we'll be able to enter. After 4 days, the Saint Martial secret zone will forcefully send us out. Yes. Duan Lingtian nodded. There were only 4 days left. They only had enough time to enter the location of one more divine ability relic. This will be our last divine ability relic. I really hope it's a medium grade or higher divine ability, Wang Feizan said as she glanced at Duan Lingtian. As it turned out, the divine ability contained in this divine ability relic just so happened to be Duan Lingtian's. Let's hope so. Duan Lingtian nodded calmly as though it did not matter to him what grade the divine ability inside was. Wang Feizan no longer said anything when she saw the person involved did not seem worried. However, when they faced their first trial, she was completely taken aback. How are they so strong? Even Wang Feizan, who was at the intermediate refined saint stage, could not pass the first trial. The difficulty of this trial was even more difficult than the first trial where she obtained her high-grade movement divine ability, the 1,000 illusory shadows. High-grade divine ability, Wang Feizan muttered as she took a deep breath. What good luck. Duan Lingtian smiled as he strode out. The trial that Wang Feizan failed to pass was nothing to him. It did not take him more than 20 breaths to kill all the wild beasts in the first trial. Subsequently, he began to move ahead to the next trial. Compared to the trials where Wang Feizan obtained her high-grade movement ability, the 1,000 illusory shadows, the trials ahead were much more difficult. This made Duan Lingtian and Wang Feizan even more certain that the divine ability contained in this divine ability relic was most likely a high-grade divine ability. As Duan Lingtian faced the next trial, he appeared in another sword shrine. He thought to himself, don't tell me it's really a sword-type high-grade divine ability. The previous few trials had taken place in various sword shrines as well. Naturally, they were all different sword shrines. The trial in each sword shrine was completely different from one another. Not only that, but it was extremely difficult to pass as well. At the very least, Wang Feizan did not have the confidence to enter at all. However, to Duan Lingtian, who had entered the abyssal swamp that housed the divine ability relic and obtained the one and only high-grade divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic, in the mystical sky mansion's St. Martial secret zone, these trials were nothing. He passed all of them easily. The trials he had gone through in the abyssal swamp were much more difficult than this. The high-grade divine ability contained inside this divine ability relic is surely not as good as the elementary devouring tactic. However, it should be more powerful than the high-grade movement divine ability, the 1,000 illusory shadows, that she obtained earlier. This could be seen from the difficulty of the trials. Looks like your luck has gathered together to form a huge one, Wang Feizan mused with an envious expression on her face. Duan Lingtian smiled and did not say anything as he continued to face the next trial. Although he had changed his mindset, he obviously would not reject such a high-grade divine ability that was placed in front of him. This is the final trial. I'll finally find out what kind of divine ability is contained in this divine ability relic, Wang Feizan said as they entered the location of the final trial. The final trial of every divine ability relic would be a fight with an opponent that mastered the divine ability. After defeating the opponent, one would be able to obtain the divine ability the opponent had cast. During the final trial, a white-clad young sword cultivator appeared before Duan Lingtian and Wang Feizan's eyes. He carried a sheathed sword on his back as he stood ramrod straight. He subtly gave of the aura as though he was one with the sword. Sword cultivator. Duan Lingtian raised an eyebrow as a terrifying battle intent emitted out from his body. He had cultivated the supreme sword Dao mental cultivation method, the sovereign heart sword, and he could be considered as a sword cultivator as well. Now that he had encountered someone who was also sword cultivator, it was only natural for him to feel competitive. Whoosh, 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 just as Duan Lingtian released the battle intent from his body, the white-clad young man's figure flashed and vanished from his spot. Naturally, he only disappeared from Wang Feizan's sight. In Duan Lingtian's eyes, this white-clad young man had just flown up into the air at an extremely fast speed. Despite his fast speed, it was only equivalent to the elite powerhouses at the peak of the refined saint stage. It was far from being comparable to his strength. Moreover, his speed was not even comparable to the woman in the final trial where Wang Feizan obtained the divine ability, the 1,000 illusory shadows. However, the woman's speed was only par with Duan Lingtian due to the boost from the divine ability. This white-clad young man, on the other hand, did not have any movement divine ability to aid him. However, in terms of strength, the woman can't compare to him at all. When Duan Lingtian saw the powerful aura emitting out of the white-clad young man as he pulled his long sword out of his sheath, he instantly noticed his strength. He must be an elite at the peak of the refined saint stage, and he had not even used his divine ability yet. Once he used his divine ability, his strength would be enhanced. His divine ability must be a high-grade sword-type divine ability. However, I wonder if it's an offensive, defensive, assist or a movement divine ability. Sword-type divine abilities were sorted into different categories as well. Soon after, the white-clad young man cast the divine ability and answered Duan Lingtian's question. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. As the white-clad young man pulled his long sword out of its sheath, it seemed as though he did not move, but 9 clones suddenly appeared around him. The 9 clones were identical to him. All of them were holding onto a sword and were staring at Duan Lingtian. What a lifelike clone. When Duan Lingtian saw the 10 figures began to make their moves together, he extended his divine consciousness, but he could not tell which was the real one. At this moment, Duan Lingtian discovered the 10 figures had begun to charge at him one after another. The 3-foot-long blades in their hands even shot out 7-foot-long sword rays that were aimed at his head. Swish, 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 the 10 white-clad young men were like 10 sword deities that descended from heaven. Their speed was so fast as they wielded their sword and slashed at Duan Lingtian. How fast! At this moment, Duan Lingtian's expression had also turned grave. He discovered the sword rays that the white-clad young men shot out had reached the highest level a powerhouse at the peak of the refined saint stage could reach. Each slash of their swords was equivalent to the most powerful attack of a powerhouse at the peak of the refined saint stage. Swish! The white-clad young man in the lead charged at Duan Lingtian as he pointed his sword at the colossal sword bell that had formed around Duan Lingtian's body. When the strike landed, it caused the colossal sword bell to tremble for a moment before it slightly dimmed. Swish! Another white-clad young man charged out and another strike landed on the colossal sword bell, turning it even dimmer. Swish! The third white-clad young man wielded his sword and shattered Duan Lingtian's colossal sword bell immediately. Although Duan Lingtian's colossal sword bell was equivalent to the defense of an early eminent saint stage martial cultivator, it could only withstand the attack from a powerhouse at the peak of the refined saint stage twice at most. It was definitely unable to withstand a third strike. Duan Lingtian's defense had shattered with just 3 strikes of swords. After Duan Lingtian had lost his defensive shield, the remaining 7 white-clad young men continued to charge at him with their swords. Whoosh! Under such circumstances, it was only natural that Duan Lingtian chose to dodge. However, no matter how he dodged, the swords in the hands of the 7 white-clad young men were still aimed at him. The 7 swords slashed across the sky and left long sword marks in its wake. At this moment, the sky seemed as though it was going to be slashed by the 7 swords. Swish! Without any warning, the rapid sound of wind whistling resonated by Duan Lingtian's ears. When he instinctively raised his head, he saw the 3-foot-long blade in one of the white-clad young men's hand had increased in size as it slashed toward him. Moreover, he was charging at him directly at a speed that seemed even faster than his own speed. This is the real body. At the same time, Duan Lingtian also noticed the other 9 clones were quickly merging back with the original body. As each clone entered the young man's body, the energy in the sword of the young man's hand was greatly boosted. In the end, the speed the white-clad young man's real body charged at Duan Lingtian as he held onto the 3-foot-long blade in his hand. His speed had even reached the speed of an intermediate eminent saint stage powerhouse. How fast! Horror dawned on Duan Lingtian. The white-clad young man charged out with the sword in his hand at a rapid speed. Moreover, the force he wielded was extremely horrifying as well. It was far stronger than Duan Lingtian's strongest attack. Chapter 1790. The white-clad man's strike was so powerful and fast that Duan Lingtian was unable to avoid it. I'll just have to endure it. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath and immediately summoned his Sun True Origin to form the 10,000 Swords territory as fast as he could. However, the sword the white-clad man wielded was too fast. Before Duan Lingtian's 10,000 Swords territory was formed, it had already shattered the territory as though it was breaking off a dead branch. The 10,000 Swords territory shattered as the Sun True Origin was in chaos, causing serious internal injuries to Duan Lingtian. Barf! Duan Lingtian threw up a mouthful of blood that splattered everywhere. However, he had no time to care about his injuries. The white-clad young man was charging toward him with his sword like a sword deity who had descended from heaven, intending to kill him. At that instant when the 10,000 Swords territory was shattered, the Sun True Origin in his body immediately surged through the 99 saint veins in his body and gathered on his palm. It surged out and transformed into a brilliant and golden 3-foot-long blade. It looked like the dazzling sun from afar. Shoo! The white-clad young man's eyes were cold, and his face was blank. The sword in his hand was like the Grim Reaper's scythe to Duan Lingtian, it could take his life at any time. Although he would not really die if he was killed by the white-clad young man, Duan Lingtian had no plans of giving up. This was the final trial of the Divine Ability Relic. He would be able to obtain a high-grade Divine Ability as long as he managed to pass this trial. Based on the white-clad young man's attack, the Divine Ability was obviously a sword-type Divine Ability. It was exactly the type of Divine Ability that Duan Lingtian wanted. Previously, Duan Lingtian felt a little gloomy since he did not think he would have a chance of encountering such a divine ability. However, now that he was presented with this chance, Duan Lingtian was unwilling to let it go. I'll do my best to kill him and obtain the divine ability. If I still can't defeat him after trying my best, then I'll have no regrets. Duan Lingtian grew increasingly determined. With that determination, Duan Lingtian charged out with the 3-foot-long blade in his hand. It swept out as fast as a bolt of lightning as he faced the white-clad young man directly. Shoo! The power contained in the white-clad young man's strike was as powerful as the strength of an intermediate eminent saint stage powerhouse. Although Duan Lingtian had used all his might, his strike was still significantly weaker than the white-clad young man's strike. Shoo! Shoo! The golden dazzling 3-foot-long blade finally clashed with the 3-foot-long blade in the white-clad young man's hand. Power surged into the swords from both directions. It made the ground tremble as though they would crack. So powerful, Duan Lingtian discovered how terrifying the white-clad young man's strike was when their swords clashed. The strength of the white-clad young man's sword completely surpassed the strength of his sword. The power of his opponent seemed to surge into his hands and into his body. The power was strong and destructive. It began to wreak havoc in Duan Lingtian's body as soon as it entered it, severely injuring his internal organs. It was difficult for Duan Lingtian to resist the foreign power in his body even as he hurriedly mobilized the remaining Sun True Origin in his body. No, Duan Lingtian's body trembled as his expression changed dramatically. Wang Feizan, who stood in the distance, observing, could not intervene at all since the beginning. However, when she saw Duan Lingtian had fallen into a disadvantageous position after crossing swords with the white-clad young man, her expression changed. It seemed as though she had transformed into a gust of wind as she charged directly toward the white-clad young man. Wang Feizan was an intermediate refined saint stage martial cultivator after all, so her attack was not that weak. Even someone as strong as the white-clad young man would have to use some of his strength to withstand the attack from Wang Feizan. He condensed a sword ray and shot it toward Wang Feizan. Shoo! Accompanied by the sound of sword whistling in the air, the sword ray pierced through Wang Feizan's body. From the beginning until the end, Wang Feizan did not even have a chance to react. It's too fast. That was Wang Feizan's only thought before her clone disappeared. Lingtian, you can do it. Wang Feizan thought inwardly as her divine consciousness left her clone and returned to her actual body and was sent out by the Saint Martial Secret Zone. While Wang Feizan's clone was killed by the white-clad young man, Duan Lingtian, who was originally in a precarious situation, managed to obtain some breathing space since the white-clad young man had suddenly withdrawn his power. It was during that momentary respite that Duan Lingtian suddenly recalled the profundity of the Sovereign Heart Sword's second stage. The sword moves as my heart beats, and the sword moves along with my heart's desire. The power the white-clad young man sent into Duan Lingtian was ultimately a sword-based divine ability that amplified one's strength. Ultimately, it was also the power of the sword. Duan Lingtian's Sovereign Heart Sword was the supreme sword Dao cultivation method. Although he had not cultivated it to the highest stage, it took him only a while to summon the power of the second stage of the Sovereign Heart Sword cultivation method to expel the power of the white-clad young man from his body. It was exactly at this time Wang Feizan's clone had completely disappeared. Die! Duan Lingtian's eyes turned cold. Before the white-clad young man could turn his attention completely back on Duan Lingtian, the 3-foot-long blade in his hand began to tremble violently. At this time, the profundity of the Sovereign Heart Sword's second stage led the Sun True Origin and the white-clad young man's power that had been expelled from Duan Lingtian's body and gathered in the 3-foot-long blade in his hands. The sword thrust forward at the white-clad young man like a WYRM dragon lunging out of its lair. Shoo! The strike was swift and the piercing aura was so cold it seemed to have lowered the temperature in the surrounding. Duan Lingtian's strike eventually pierced the white-clad young man's body. There was no bloody and gory scene to be seen. The white-clad young man's body vanished immediately. Finally past it, after Duan Lingtian killed the white-clad young man, he sighed in relief. He still felt a lingering fear when he recalled the scene earlier. Luckily I managed to summon the second stage of the Sovereign Heart Sword cultivation method at that crucial moment and expel all his power from my body. However, I should also thank Wang Feizan. If it weren't for her distracting him, I might not have been able to expel his power from my body even if I summon the Sovereign Heart Sword cultivation method, Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Crack! Suddenly, a cracking sound reverberated from above him. Duan Lingtian looked up and saw a crack in the air with just a glance. Inside the crack was a huge stone sword. The stone sword fell to the ground tip first and embedded itself into the ground. It's not a stone tablet. Based on Duan Lingtian's experience, all of the divine abilities he obtained, apart from the elementary devouring tactic, was recorded in a stone tablet. It was his first time seeing a stone sword in here. However, after he extended his divine consciousness into the stone sword, he quickly realized the stone sword was actually similar to the stone tablets. They were all instruments that contained the divine abilities. It really is an offensive sword-type divine ability. It's a high-grade divine ability, the otherworldly celestial. Duan Lingtian, whose divine consciousness had merged with the stone sword, quickly learned about divine ability the white-clad young man had cast earlier. The otherworldly celestial. Indeed, it lives up to its name. Previously, when the white-clad young man charged toward him, he indeed appeared like a sword deity that had descended from heaven. The sword of the otherworldly celestial was really fast. Perhaps, Duan Lingtian had cultivated the supreme sword Dao cultivation method, the sovereign heart sword. He merely took half a day to memorize all the information regarding the divine ability, the otherworldly celestial. With just a thought, he could access all the information he had memorized to comprehend and cultivate it. This trip to the Saint Stage secret zone is quite fruitful. In just a blink of an eye, the divine ability relic disappeared completely, and Duan Lingtian was returned to the entrance of the divine ability relic. There's still one more day left. I think I'll spend this time meditating. After counting the days, he knew the Saint Martial secret zone would send him out tomorrow. Hence, Duan Lingtian sat down cross-legged and waited for it to happen. Wang Feizan's appearance outside the Saint Martial secret zone had also attracted a lot of attention. It should be noted there were 30 people who entered the Saint Martial secret zone, and there were only 5 people left inside before Wang Feizan came out. Now that Wang Feizan was sent out, it meant there were 4 people left inside. Miss Feizan. When Lu Jian saw Wang Feizan, he immediately went over to her with a guilty expression on his face. I'm sorry, I'm too weak and wasn't more of a help. He and Wang Feizan had discovered 2 divine ability relics together. Wang Feizan had passed the trial to obtain the first divine ability relic, but she had offered the divine ability to him. They were unable to pass through all the trials to obtain the second divine ability relic. Moreover, he was killed there and eliminated. You don't have to apologize. I offered the divine ability to you in order to help Lingtian return the favor he owed. From now on, Lingtian no longer owes your senior any favor. Do you understand? Wang Feizan said as she looked at him coldly. Yes. Lu Jian nodded. Previously, he was unaware Duan Lingtian had wanted to work with him to return his senior a favor. When the relationship between Lingtian and Li Feng was exposed, he found out Lingtian wanted to help Li Feng to return the favor he owed his senior. His senior was the second elder of Raging Wave Mansion, Lu Hongguang. Zhu Luqi, the palace master of Heaven Palace, looked at Wang Feizan with bright eyes as he asked, Miss Wang, did you meet Lingtian in there? Most people were curious about how Lingtian was faring inside the Saint Martial secret zone. This was because Duan Lingtian had encountered the number 1 divine ability relic in the Saint Martial secret zone and did not get disqualified. There must be something strange. All of them wanted to know how Duan Lingtian managed to escape. Yes. Wang Feizan did not know what Zhu Luqi would ask next, but she replied, yes, I've been with him for the last 20 days. Once Wang Feizan finished speaking, the eyes of everyone present shifted to her in unison as they broke out in a discussion. Chapter 1791. Qian Pingsheng, the palace master of Yellow Palace, looked at Wang Feizan and asked curiously, did he mention a divine ability relic that was extremely difficult to obtain? Do you know how he escaped? An extremely difficult to obtain divine ability relic. Escape. Wang Feizan frowned and shook her head. I didn't hear him mention it. It seems like he didn't tell you about it. If that's the case, we can only wait for him to tell us about it tomorrow, Qian Pingsheng said with a nod. Half a day later, another person was sent out. This person was Gao Peng, a Heaven Palace's disciple. He was also the strongest person after Duan Lingtian, Wang Feizan, and Zhao Ji. Gao Peng was also an intermediate refined Saint Stage martial cultivator. However, he did not have a pleased expression on his face when he came out. How could he? He was so close to passing the trials of a medium-grade divine ability relic. At the crucial moment, he was killed during one of the trials due to a small mistake he made. Due to one small mistake, he had failed to obtain a medium-grade divine ability. He only managed to obtain a few low-grade divine abilities. After Gao Peng, no one else was disqualified until the next day when the time was up. 3 people were sent out from the Saint Martial secret zone. They're out. One of the 3 figures was Duan Lingtian. He let out a breath when he came out and stretched as though no one was there. At the same time, he noticed the 2 people next to him. These 2 disciples were not from the Heaven Palace, and their cultivation base was exposed to his divine eyes. They were both powerhouses at the intermediate refined saint stage. It seems they're the other 2 intermediate refined saint stage disciples of mystical Sky Mansion. Duan Lingtian had long heard there were 2 other powerful intermediate refined saint stage disciples in the mystical Sky Mansion, apart from the Heaven Palaces Zhao Ji and Gao Peng. They were from the Earth Palace and Mystical Palace respectively. As for the younger generation from the Yellow Palace, none of them was at the intermediate refined saint stage or above. Once Duan Lingtian regained his senses after he had exited the Saint Martial secret zone, he realized everyone's attention was on him. Duan Lingtian looked at Wang Feizan who stood behind the Palace Master of Heaven Palace and asked through voice transmission, "What's wrong?" All of them wanted to know how you escaped from the location of the number 1 divine ability relic in the Saint Martial secret zone. Wang Feizan replied through voice transmission, "I didn't hear you mention anything about the number divine ability relic." The number 1 divine ability relic? Duan Lingtian had a baffled expression on his face. What was that? I heard it was a divine ability relic that had extremely difficult to pass trials. In the history of mystical Sky Mansion, no one has ever made it through the first trial of that divine ability relic. Wang Feizan said. In the history of mystical Sky Mansion, no one had ever passed the first trial of that divine ability relic. After listening to Wang Feizan, Duan Lingtian immediately thought about the Abyssal Swamp. The first trial of the Abyssal Swamp was definitely the most insane one among all the first trials he had to pass to obtain divine ability relics. Unless it was a young powerhouse whose strength was comparable to those at the eminent saint stage, most people would not be able to make it through that trial. That wild beast clan was extremely terrifying. Duan Lingtian exchanged a few more words with Wang Feizan before confirming the number 1 divine ability relic in the mystical Sky Mansion's Saint Martial secret zone referred to the divine ability relic located in the Abyssal Swamp. They don't even know what divine ability is contained in the divine ability relic in the Abyssal Swamp, but they had already acknowledged it as the number 1 divine ability in the mystical Sky Mansion's Saint Martial secret zone. Duan Lingtian did not expect the divine ability he had obtained had such a title. However, all of them wanted to know how I escaped from the first trial at the Abyssal Swamp. Does this mean no one thinks I would pass the trials and obtain the divine ability? Duan Lingtian thought to himself, if I told them I managed to obtain that divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic, in the Abyssal Swamp, the mystical Sky Mansion won't keep me here and forbid me from leaving, right? Duan Lingtian did not consider this before he came out. However, after he came out and discovered the significance of the elementary devouring tactic to the mystical Sky Mansion, this thought appeared in his mind. Although he was grateful to the mystical Sky Mansion since he had obtained the elementary devouring tactic, he did not plan to stay in the mystical Sky Mansion forever. He planned to wait until he had broken through to the eminent saint stage at most before he would leave the mystical Sky Mansion for the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. At this moment, Duan Lingtian made up his mind and decided not to mention he had obtained the elementary devouring tactic divine ability. Faced with the question from the Palace Master of Yellow Palace, Qian Pingsheng, his expression turned slightly serious as he said, "When the surrounding swamp began to bubble and boil, I instinctively felt something was wrong and immediately escaped. Come to think of it, if I wait until the wild beast clan appeared, I'm afraid I wouldn't have survived." Duan Lingtian sighed in relief when he finished speaking as though fear still lingered in his heart. "I see, you're quite lucky." Qian Pingsheng did not doubt Duan Lingtian's words. Other people shared the same sentiment as well. All of them did not think Duan Lingtian would be able to pass the first trial of the number 1 divine ability relic. At this time, an antagonistic voice said, "Tisk. Coward, choosing to escape before the wild beast clan even appeared." The owner of the voice was none other than Zhao Ji. Faced with Zhao Ji's rude remark, Duan Lingtian said with a faint smile on his face, "No matter how cowardly it is, it's still better than those who are eliminated and kicked out after 3 days. Once Duan Lingtian finished his sentence, the corners of many people's mouths began to twitch. Lingtian really knew how to rub salt into one's wound. However, they did not think Lingtian was in the wrong since Zhao Ji had begun insulting him first. Otherwise, Lingtian would not have mentioned this and humiliated him. "You, After hearing Duan Lingtian's words, Zhao Ji's expression changed dramatically. He opened his mouth, intending to say something, but a voice transmission from his father, Zhao Dang, rang in his ears and made him stop talking. He then sent a voice transmission to Duan Lingtian. Lingtian, you and I can't live under the same sky. I won't be here if you're in the mystical sky mansion, and if I'm here, you won't be here. Then, you'll have to go, I guess, Duan Lingtian responded calmly through voice transmission as though he was not afraid. Humph, we'll see, Zhao Ji snorted coldly through voice transmission but did not say anything else. However, when he looked at Duan Lingtian, his eyes seemed to be spitting fire. Although Zhao Deng, who was standing next to Zhao Ji, did not say anything, hints of coldness and malice could be seen in the depths of his eyes. If looks could kill, Duan Lingtian would have died 1,000,000 times. Naturally, Duan Lingtian noticed the malicious gazes from the pair of father and son, but he was not bothered. Previously, at the summit of Heaven Palace, he was already prepared to oppose the Zhao clan the moment he slapped Zhao Ji twice. That was why when he encountered Zhao Ji in the Saint Martial secret zone, he had instantly killed Zhao Ji's clone and eliminated him. Since he had already offended them, it would not make a difference if he offended them further. Who's that? Suddenly, Duan Lingtian discovered there was a stranger looking at him. He saw a skinny old man standing and staring at him quietly. It was his first time seeing this old man. He was not one of the mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials. Elder Ku, now that you've seen the person, based on your words, isn't it time for you to leave? Zhu Luqi, the palace master of Heaven Palace, said calmly as he looked at Ku Mi. Elder Ku, Duan Lingtian looked surprised. It seemed like the old man was not from the mystical Sky Mansion. Otherwise, Zhu Luqi, the palace master of Heaven Palace, would not have spoken to him in that manner. At that same time, Duan Lingtian also discovered that the skinny old man had a disappointed expression when he looked at him. Why is he disappointed? Duan Lingtian was puzzled by this. He was certain this was his first time seeing the old man, so why did the old man look so disappointed? Duan Lingtian was, naturally, unaware that the old man standing before him was none other than Ku Mi, the right-hand man of his cheapskate father, Duan Rufeng. Ku Mi looked so disappointed because he discovered Lingtian was not wearing a disguise. He's not the young mansion master. Ku Mi had seen Duan Lingtian's portrait. The current Duan Lingtian looked nothing like the young mansion master he was looking for. Ku Mi did not expect, even in his wildest dreams, that the young man standing in front of him was actually the young mansion master he was searching for. He was unaware his young mansion master's disguising secret tactic would not leave a trace at all. It was undetectable. Mansion Master Meng, farewell. Faced with Zhu Luqi's aggressive question, Ku Mi did not bother with him. Instead, he looked at the mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion, Meng Qing, who was standing nearby and bade him farewell. Ku Mi's departure seemed as though he had vanished into thin air to most people who were present. Among those who were present, Meng Qing was the only one who could clearly see Ku Mi's departure. He's so fast. All the Mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials who were present looked surprised by the strength of the powerhouse from the Azure Cloud Mansion, Ku Mi. Their strength was not in Ku Mi's league at all. Subsequently, it was time to report what they had gained. Apart from Duan Lingtian, who planned to hold back, the others dutifully reported what they had gained. The number of divine abilities they obtained and the grade of divine abilities they obtained would affect their future standing in the Mystical Sky Mansion. Those who obtained higher grade divine abilities would naturally receive more attention and guidance from the Mystical Sky Mansion. High-grade divine ability. When it was Wang Feizan's turn to report what she gained, and she said that she had obtained a high-grade movement divine ability, the 1,000 illusory shadows, it shocked everyone present on the scene. Everyone's eyes immediately shifted to Wang Feizan, and she became the center of attention. Chapter 1792, High-grade divine ability. Up until this moment, Wang Feizan was the first person to say she had obtained a high-grade divine ability. At this moment, the palace master of Yellow Palace, Qian Ping Sheng, said, the 1,000 illusory shadows, in the history of Mystical Sky Mansion, there was one senior who obtained it. However, he was a male, and therefore, he did not manage to master this divine ability. Nevertheless, according to the notes he left behind, if a female disciple obtained this divine ability, they'll have a high chance of mastering it. All the Mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking official instantly stared at Wang Feizan with a burning gaze. Wang Feizan was a female martial cultivator. Did it mean she would be able to master that high-grade divine ability? Senior brother Zhu, let Miss Wang join our Yellow Palace. Soon after, Qian Pingsheng looked at Zhu Luqi and began his campaign to snatch her to his palace. I intend to make her my direct disciple. Junior brother Qian, it's too late because I also plan to make her my direct disciple. After learning Wang Feizan had obtained the high-grade movement divine ability, the 1,000 illusory shadows, Zhu Luqi, naturally, would not allow her to join the Yellow Palace. Hence, when he heard Qian Pingsheng's words, he immediately stated his intention of making Wang Feizan his direct disciple. After hearing Zhu Luqi's words, Wang Feizan's eyes brightened. She had told them about the high-grade divine ability she had obtained so she could have better treatment from the mystical sky mansion. Now that the Palace Master of Heaven Palace wanted to take her in as his direct disciple, did this not mean that she had achieved her goal? The Palace Master of Heaven Palace was the leader of all the Vice Mansion Masters in the mystical Sky Mansion. His strength and status were only second to the Mansion Master of Mystical Sky Mansion and the two Guardians. It was only natural for Wang Feizan to feel delighted being taken in as his direct disciple. Zhu Luqi ignored Qian Pingsheng who had a glum expression and looked at Wang Feizan. He asked with a smile, "What about it? Girl, are you willing to acknowledge me as your master?" Greetings to master. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Wang Feizan kneeled down in the air and kowtowed at Zhu Luqi 3 times as a formal acknowledgement of her master. Zhu Luqi laughed heartily when he saw this. He was extremely pleased. Congratulations senior brother Zhu, congratulations Lord Palace Master. At the same time, everyone who was present congratulated Zhu Luqi, including Qian Pingsheng, the Palace Master of Yellow Palace. Although it felt as though his heart was bleeding, he could only accept this. In fact, it was not only Qian Pingsheng, the Palace Master of Yellow Palace, who felt like his heart was bleeding, but the other Vice Mansion Masters of Mystical Sky Mansion, apart from Zhao Deng, also felt as though their hearts were bleeding. Was there anyone who did not want an outstanding disciple who possessed a high-grade divine ability? Among all the Mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials who were present, there was only the Mansion Master, Meng Qing, who could contest the words of Zhu Luqi, the Palace Master of Heaven Palace. Hence, when Zhu Luqi said he intended to accept Wang Feizan as his direct disciple, no one else said a thing because they knew it was futile. Congratulations. Duan Lingtian looked at Wang Feizan and congratulated her through voice transmission. That day after I was disqualified, did you defeat the white-clad sword cultivator? Wang Feizan asked through voice transmission. That day, she was killed during the final trial by the sword cultivator guarding the high-grade divine ability relic. The sword cultivator's strength was out of her league. Even she could not confirm if Duan Lingtian passed the final trial or not. Yes, Duan Lingtian nodded. Defeated him by luck. If that's the case, you've also obtained a high-grade divine ability? Wang Feizan asked. Yes. Duan Lingtian nodded and then said, however, I hope you hope that I'll keep it a secret, right? Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. Before Duan Lingtian finished his sentence, Wang Feizan interrupted Duan Lingtian enthusiastically and promised him. You'll leave the mystical sky mansion in the future and look for your master in the upper province. If they know you've obtained a high-grade divine ability, they might not let you go. Thanks. Duan Lingtian's heart warmed when he heard Wang Feizan's voice transmission that was filled with understanding. Don't thank me. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have obtained the 1,000 illusory shadows, Wang Feizan retorted before she continued to say, that's why we're even. However, I helped you to return the favor to Lu Jian Sr. So you still owe me for that. Duan Lingtian was rendered speechless when he heard her words. Did she not consider that favor returned? In that instant, Duan Lingtian felt like telling her he had obtained another high-grade divine ability so he did not owe her anything. However, he did not say it eventually. Duan Lingtian's strength was undoubtedly the strongest among those who entered the Saint Martial secret zone. Therefore, everyone had high expectations of the divine abilities that he had obtained. However, the greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. One medium-grade divine ability. Most of the mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials, including Mansion Master Meng Qing, were somewhat disappointed when they learned that Duan Lingtian merely obtained a medium-grade divine ability and several low-grade divine abilities. Only people from the Zhao clan were gloating. You, how could you not obtain any high-grade divine abilities? With your strength, ordinary high-grade divine ability relic trials shouldn't be difficult at all. The palace master of Yellow Palace, Qian Ping Sheng, looked at Duan Lingtian in disbelief and surprise. I only encountered 2 high-grade divine ability relics. Duan Lingtian shook his head and said, the first was the number 1 divine ability relic. The second one was the divine ability relic, the 1,000 illusory shadows. That means you offered the 1,000 illusory shadows to phase on. The palace master of Heaven Palace, Zhu Luqi, gave Duan Lingtian an approving look. He felt Duan Lingtian was someone who could see the bigger picture. The 1,000 illusory shadows divine ability was much harder for male martial cultivators to master compared to female martial cultivators. It was the right choice to give it to a female martial cultivator. Actually, that's not. When Duan Lingtian was about to say he did not give it up to Wang Feizan, she quickly interrupted him by saying, yes, master. He gave it up for me. If he didn't help me, I wouldn't have been able to obtain this divine ability. Instantly, all of Mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials, including Mansion Master Meng Qing, looked at Duan Lingtian approvingly except for Zhao Dang. They all shared Zhu Luqi's sentiment. All of them felt Duan Lingtian had made the right decision. Not everyone would be able to give up a high-grade divine ability. Lingtian, you're pretty good. One of the Vice Mansion Masters of Mystical Sky Mansion praised Duan Lingtian. Another Vice Mansion Master of Mystical Sky Mansion chimed in, yes. In the future, if our Mystical Sky Mansion managed to pass down the high-grade divine ability, the 1,000 illusory shadows, you'll definitely be credited for it. At that time, your name will inevitably be remembered in the history of Mystical Sky Mansion. As one after another Mystical Sky Mansion's disciples stated their gains, Wang Feizan remained the only one who obtained a high-grade divine ability among the 30 people who had entered the Saint Martial secret zone. Naturally, this was because Duan Lingtian had decided to conceal his gains. Moreover, among the 30 people who entered the Saint Martial secret zone, Lu Jian was the only person whose cultivation base was below the refined saint stage but still managed to obtain a medium-grade divine ability. Instantly, all the disciples at the peak of the pristine saint stage who were present looked at Lu Jian in envy and jealousy. Apart from Zhao Ji, who was eliminated by Duan Lingtian early on, among the intermediate refined saint stage martial cultivators who entered the Saint Martial secret zone, there were 2 other people, apart from Wang Feizan, who also obtained medium-grade divine abilities. Gao Peng was the only one who was in a situation similar to Zhao Ji. Both of them did not manage to obtain a medium-grade divine ability. Naturally, he was in a better situation than Zhao Ji since he managed to obtain 3 low-grade divine abilities. Meanwhile, there were a few early refined saint stage powerhouses who obtained medium-grade divine abilities. This made Gao Peng and Zhao Ji's expressions turn gloomy. In the end, there were people who were happy with their trip inside the Saint Martial secret zone trip, and there were also people who were upset about it. Naturally, Duan Lingtian belonged to the group of people who were happy about it. Even after Meng Qing, the mansion master of the Mystical Sky Mansion, gave an order to disperse the crowd, he did not mention accepting Duan Lingtian as his direct disciple. Duan Lingtian heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this. It seems like the news I spread through the mouth of others has dispelled the mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion's notion of accepting me as his disciple. It's for the better since I won't be staying for long in the Mystical Sky Mansion. However, if I can master the divine abilities, the elementary devouring tactic and the otherworldly celestial, I must pass it down to a suitable Mystical Sky Mansion's disciple, Duan Lingtian swore to himself inwardly. Senior brother Lingtian, thank you. Duan Lingtian had left along with Ji Yuli and Wang Feizan. However, before they had gone too far, Lu Jian caught up to them and sincerely thanked Duan Lingtian. If it was not for Duan Lingtian's sake, Wang Feizan would not have helped him to obtain a medium-grade divine ability. Don't thank me. If you need to thank someone, you can thank Elder Lu Hongguang, the second elder of Raging Wave Mansion. Moreover, please help me pass him a message. Tell him that Li Feng did not intend to stand them up, but he had something else to do, Duan Lingtian said. I'll pass on this message. Lu Jian hurriedly nodded before he bade farewell to Duan Lingtian. He did not want to bother him any longer than necessary. During their journey back, Ji Yuli glanced at Duan Lingtian as he said, Junior brother Lingtian, you really have mediocre luck. Although you encountered 2 high-grade divine ability relics, one of it is impossible to obtain while the other one isn't suitable for male martial cultivators. If it's yours, it's yours. If it's not meant to be, one shouldn't force it. Duan Lingtian merely smiled faintly when he heard Ji Yuli's words. When Ji Yuli heard his words, it sounded to him as though Duan Lingtian had resigned to his fate. Whereas when Wang Feizan heard his words, it held another meaning because she knew Duan Lingtian had obtained a sword-type high-grade offensive divine ability. Bang! Suddenly, the sound of an explosion reverberated from the sky. It shocked all of them so much that they stopped moving. Following that, a grating voice sounded and spread through the entire mystical sky mansion. I'm the deputy leader of Mountainshade Black Market, Feng Bi Yuyi. I came to the mystical sky mansion today to see the strongest person among the younger generation, Ling Tian. Little brother Ling Tian, please come out and meet me. The deputy leader of Mountainshade Black Market, Feng Bi Yuyi. The entire mystical sky mansion was in an uproar. When Ji Yuli and Wang Feizan glanced at him, Duan Lingtian was momentarily shocked. Looking for me? Chapter 1793. It's Feng Bi Yuyi, the deputy leader of Mountainshade Black Market. He's the right-hand man of the Mountainshade Black Market's leader. His strength is not inferior to the two guardians of our mystical sky mansion. Feng Bi Yuyi did not tone down his voice, and it spread through the entire mystical sky mansion. Anyone who was not in closed-door cultivation clearly heard his voice. He came to look for Ling Tian. It seems like Ling Tian's innate talent has even attracted the Mountainshade Black Market. Even the deputy leader of Mountainshade Black Market, Feng Bi Yuyi, personally came to see him. Ling Tian hasn't acknowledged anyone in the mystical sky mansion as his master. If Feng Bi Yuyi manages to recruit him, it'll be a huge loss to our mystical sky mansion. I heard that once Ling Tian breaks through to the eminent saint stage, he plans to leave for the upper province. He's currently at the peak of the refined saint stage. He's just a step away from breaking through to the eminent saint stage. Perhaps, it was due to this, Lord Mansion Master who originally planned to accept him as his direct disciple dismissed the idea. Yes, with Ling Tian's innate talent, he'll definitely break through to the eminent saint stage within 1 or 2 years. He won't be staying for long in our mystical sky mansion. I'm afraid Feng Bi Yuyi, the deputy leader of Mountainshade Black Market, has come for naught. If I were Ling Tian, I definitely wouldn't join the Mountainshade Black Market since it won't be long before I'd leave for the upper province. There's no point in switching places. The group of mystical sky mansion disciples discussed among themselves. No one thought Feng Bi Yuyi would be able to persuade Duan Lingtian to join the Mountainshade Black Market. The appearance of Feng Bi Yuyi, the deputy leader of Mountainshade Black Market, naturally, alarmed the mystical sky mansion's high-ranking officials. Apart from the mansion master of mystical sky mansion, Meng Qing, the other vice mansion masters of the mystical sky mansion who had just left for their own residences turned around and headed in the direction of the voice. When Meng Qing was not around, the group of mystical sky mansion's vice mansion masters was naturally led by Zhu Luqi, the palace master of Heaven Palace. He stood close to Feng Bi Yuyi and greeted him coldly, Deputy Leader Feng. Feng Bi Yuyi had an average build and an ordinary appearance. He would not be identifiable in a crowd. He was dressed completely in black. His gray hair fluttered in the wind like writhing snakes, giving off a creepy vibe. Humph! When Feng Bi Yuyi heard Zhu Luqi's greeting, he merely snorted coldly. He did not even bother to look at Zhu Luqi in the eye. I came to the mystical sky mansion for little brother Ling Tian. People who are irrelevant to this matter should stop talking. Feng Bi Yuyi's rudeness caused Zhu Luqi's face to turn red from anger as he spat out, "You! How outrageous! Outrageous!" Feng Bi Yuyi sneered when he heard Zhu Luqi's words. Subsequently, he vanished from his spot although it did not seem like he made any movement at all. When the mystical sky mansion's high-ranking officials, including Zhu Luqi, saw this, their expressions changed drastically. Pa! At this moment, the crisp sound of a slap resonated in the air. At some point, Feng Bi Yuyi had appeared in front of Zhu Luqi and had slapped him. At this moment, Feng Bi Yuyi said in his grating voice, "Who are you to be talking to me in this manner?" The palace master of Mystical Sky Mansion's Heaven Palace, the leader of the Mystical Sky Mansion's Vice Mansion Masters, was publicly slapped. It was only natural that Zhu Luqi was infuriated. He struck at lightning speed. A vast energy transformed into a palm and enveloped Feng Bi Yuyi who stood before him. What a futile effort! Faced with Zhu Luqi's attack, Feng Bi Yuyi's expression remained unchanged. His tone was filled with disdain as he pushed his palm out against Zhu Luqi's palm. Boom! At this instant, both palms collided with each other. The collision caused an earth-shattering explosion. The clouds in the sky scattered and the sky became clear. For a moment, Those people who were hidden by the clouds appeared before the group of mystical Sky Mansion's disciples standing below. After Zhu Luqi forcefully resisted the force of the palm, his expression changed drastically as his body trembled before he was sent flying. He only managed to come to a halt after flying about 100 meters away. On the contrary, Feng Biyuyi stood unmoving in the same position. He's actually so strong. Zhu Luqi, whose internal organs suffered heavy injuries, felt blood rising in his throat. However, he resisted the urge to throw up blood. His pride did not allow him to do so in front of all these people. The other mystical Sky Mansion's Vice Mansion Masters could not help the chills that ran up their spines when they saw their leader in this predicament. They were even weaker than Zhu Luqi. If Zhu Luqi could not even withstand one strike from Feng Biyuyi, they would fare even worse. Therefore, although they were furious when they saw Zhu Luqi was injured, they did not dare to show it. As the deputy leader of Mountainshade Black Market, deputy leader, Feng Biyuyi, was unpredictable. There was no saying what he would do. For this reason, they were unwilling to provoke him. Who knew if they would end up like Zhu Luqi? In your mystical Sky Mansion, only the Mansion Master and the two old farts, strength is acceptable. To put it crudely, apart from the three of them, I, Feng Biyuyi, really don't care for any of you. Feng Biyuyi glanced at Zhu Luqi and the others in disdain as he said coldly, all right, I'm not here to fight with all of you, go summon Ling Tian, that prodigy of yours. I need to speak to him. When Feng Biyuyi spoke, it sounded like he was giving an order to Zhu Luqi and the others. Apart from Zhu Luqi, who was ignoring him, the other mystical Sky Mansion's Vice Mansion Masters stared at each other, and no one said anything for a long time. What? No one's willing to do me a favor? When Feng Biyuyi saw this, his eyes gleamed coldly. It caused the expressions of several mystical Sky Mansion's Vice Mansion Masters to change as they trembled. Save the hassle, I'm here. When the atmosphere was so tensed it felt as though a battle would erupt at any time, a voice sounded. It was none other than Duan Ling Tian who was flying toward them. Ji Yuli and Wang Feizan were next to him as well. Master, are you all right? Wang Feizan immediately went to Zhu Luqi's side, showing concern. It's all right. Zhu Luqi shook his head when he looked at Feng Biyuyi again with killing intent in his eyes. Feng Biyuyi dared to treat him like that in front of the direct disciple he had just accepted and humiliated him. When one had lived until Zhu Luqi's age, one valued pride more than anything else. Feng Biyuyi's earlier action was harder to accept than if he had killed him. From the beginning until the end, Feng Biyuyi had disregarded Zhu Luqi. He did not even bother to look him in the eyes. Feng Biyuyi's eyes gleamed as it shifted to Duan Ling Tian. He said condescendingly, you're the number one person among the mystical Sky Mansion's younger generation disciples, Ling Tian. You flatter me. I'm not number one among the younger generation in the mystical Sky Mansion. However, I am Ling Tian, Duan Ling Tian responded calmly. The strength Feng Biyuyi displayed earlier had surprised him. He did not expect the deputy leader of Mountainshade Black Market would be so strong. However, he still maintained his composure even when faced with Feng Biyuyi. Although Feng Biyuyi was strong, he was nothing in front of Elder Huo, who was in the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda. Elder Huo had a place even in the Devata realm. Duan Ling Tian managed to maintain his composure even in front of Elder Huo, let alone a mere deputy leader from a top-tier force in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. From the beginning until the end, he did not feel pressured at all. Ling Tian, I'll cut to the chase, I came on the order of the leader of our Mountainshade Black Market, Lord Dugu. Lord Dugu wants to invite you to join our Mountainshade Black Market. If you prove your worth, he might even accept you as his direct disciple. Feng Biyuyi was impressed by how Duan Ling Tian managed to maintain his composure even when faced with him. Duan Ling Tian was stunned when he heard Feng Biyuyi's words. The leader of Mountainshade Black Market's leader wanted him to join the Mountainshade Black Market. Since when did he become so popular? Zhu Luqi and the others were also dumbfounded. After all the fuss, Feng Biyuyi was merely a messenger. The person who wanted to poach their mystical Sky Mansion's talent was actually the leader of the Mountainshade Black Market. Leader Dugu of the Mountainshade Black Market was widely acknowledged as one of the strongest people in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. The other strongest powerhouse in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land was the Mansion Master of Azure Cloud Mansion, Duan Rufeng. Most importantly, both Dugu and Duan Rufeng were not considered old. They still had a lot of room for improvements in the future. They were only considered as passers-by in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. With their innate talent, they would be leaving for the upper province sooner or later. Although leader Dugu of Mountainshade Black Market was young, Zhu Luqi and the others were extremely wary of him. Therefore, when Feng Biyuyi said he came on Dugu's order, all of them remained quiet. If they offended leader Dugu, it would be easy for him to kill them even if they stayed in the mystical sky mansion or under the protection of mansion master Meng Cheng. Leader Dugu was stronger than the mansion master of mystical sky mansion. Apart from that, he also specialized in assassination. It would be as easy as killing ants if he wanted to kill them. Deputy Leader Feng, my apologies, please pass my message to Lord Dugu. I've no interest in joining the Mountainshade Black Market because I won't be staying in the mystical sky mansion for long. Moreover, I already have a master. I'll be leaving the lower province for the upper province in about 2 to 3 years' time to search for my master in the upper province. Duan Lingtian graciously rejected Feng Biyuyi's invitation. It did not occur to Feng Biyuyi that the young man standing before him would directly reject him. He did say that he came on the order of leader Dugu of Mountainshade Black Market. Was this boy not afraid of being killed for angering the Mountainshade Black Market? As for Duan Lingtian's subsequent statement, Feng Biyuyi did not doubt it because in the past 2 months, he had heard much news about Duan Lingtian from the other mystical sky mansion's disciples. He had also heard Duan Lingtian had a master who was a powerhouse from the upper province. Moreover, Li Feng who had shot to fame in the past was his senior brother. Chapter 1794. When Feng Biyuyi learned the young man before him had a master from the upper province, he knew he had to tread with caution even if he was from the Mountainshade Black Market. He was not surprised by this outcome because he had already been mentally prepared for it. Since this Ling Tian will be leaving the mystical sky mansion and the lower province within 3 years' time, he won't be a threat to our Mountainshade Black Market, Feng Biyuyi thought to himself. He glanced at Duan Ling Tian indifferently before he left immediately. According to the original order from the leader of the Mountainshade Black Market, if Ling Tian was unwilling to join the Mountainshade Black Market, he would have to kill him to avoid trouble in the future. However, there was a change in circumstances, and he did not dare to rashly act. After all, Ling Tian seemed to have a master who was a powerhouse in the upper province. Hence, he would have to report all these to the leader of Mountainshade Black Markets before he knew if he had to kill Ling Tian or not. Apart from Zhu Luqi, the palace master of Heaven Palace, whose expression remained gloomy, all the vice mansion masters of Mystical Sky Mansion heaved a sigh of relief when they saw Feng Biyuyi left just like that and returned to their respective residences. Before Zhao Deng took his leave, he glared at Duan Ling Tian with killing intent from the corner of his eyes. Ji Yuli noticed Zhao Deng's gaze and immediately said to Duan Ling Tian, "Junior brother Ling Tian, since you've offended the Zan clan, please be careful in the future, avoid going out if there's nothing urgent. Do inform me if you have to go out, I'll accompany you. If I'm there, they won't dare to act openly against you." Yes. When Duan Ling Tian heard Ji Yuli's words, his heart was filled with a sense of warmth. Although they did not know each other for a long time, they had become fast friends. The appearance of Feng Biyuyi, the deputy leader of the Mountainshade Black Market, was merely a minor matter after the closing of the Saint Martial secret zone. The attention of the group of Mystical Sky Mansion disciples shifted quickly. The rewards of the 30 people who entered the Saint Martial secret zone began to spread in the Mystical Sky Mansion. Wang Feizan, in particular, attracted a lot of attention since she was the only one who managed to obtain a high-grade divine ability. I didn't expect Wang Feizan would to obtain a high-grade divine ability, whereas Ling Tian, whom I was most optimistic about, didn't obtain a single high-grade divine ability, many Mystical Sky Mansion's disciples exclaimed. In their opinion, Wang Feizan was like an underdog who appeared out of nowhere. She even became the direct disciple of the Palace Master of Heaven Palace. Her future and prospect were boundless. After Duan Ling Tian returned to his residence after splitting up with Ji Yuli, he did not see Wang Feizan for several consecutive days. She did not come looking for him like she usually did in the past. It seems like she's pretty these days. Duan Ling Tian was not surprised. After all, Wang Feizan was not who she used to be. Not only did she obtain the high-grade divine ability, the 1,000 illusory shadows, but she even became a direct disciple of the Palace Master of Heaven Palace. However, something feels strange. I used to find it annoying when she kept looking for me in the past. Now that she has stopped coming, I find it strange. Duan Lingtian shook his head and returned to his room in preparation to enter closed-door cultivation for some time. He had enough rest in the past few days. After this closed-door cultivation, I'll need senior brother Ji Yuli's help to search for materials to repair the 4th level of the 7 Treasures Exquisite Pagoda. At that time, they should have dealt with the issue of the Rising Sky Mansion. He did not bring this matter up to Ji Yuli previously because he knew Ji Yuli was going to the Rising Sky Mansion with Guardian Ji Yu. At that time, even Vice Mansion Master Zhao Deng and Zhao Deng's father, the other guardian of the mystical Sky Mansion, would be going as well. Moreover, even Mansion Master Meng Qing would be going to the Rising Sky Mansion. They would not be going to the Rising Sky Mansion as guests. This was because of the top-tier Devil Dao cultivation method that contained the soul congregation technique that the young Mansion Master of Rising Sky Mansion possessed. I was thinking about killing Xu Jing after he has recovered. However, it seems that he won't be able to survive that long now, Duan Lingtian thought to himself. He did not think Xu Jing would survive. Once the mystical Sky Mansion managed to obtain the top-tier Devil Dao cultivation method from Xu Jing, he would lose his value and lose his chance at survival. He did not consider the chances of whether the mystical Sky Mansion would succeed or not. If Mansion Master Meng Qing personally made a move and still could not take down a 4th-rate force, then mystical Sky Mansion did not deserve to be called a 3rd-rate force. Perhaps, mystical Sky Mansion was not as strong as the Mountainshade Black Market or the Azure Cloud Mansion, but it was still not something a 4th-rate force could compare to. Elder Huo. After closing his door and entering the 7 Treasures Exquisite Pagoda, Duan Lingtian immediately looked for Elder Huo to ask about the grade of the divine ability, the Golden Crow's Wings. What grade is the Golden Crow's Wings that you taught me previously? How does it fare compared to the divine abilities from this world? Currently, apart from the Golden Crow's Wings, he had also obtained several other divine abilities. Naturally, most of them were low-grade divine abilities. He only had 3 useful divine abilities. The 3 useful divine abilities were the 6 Harmonies Golden Body, the high-grade divine abilities, the Elementary Devouring Tactic and the Otherworldly Celestial. Among the 3 divine abilities, the strongest was naturally the Elementary Devouring Tactic, followed by the Otherworldly Celestial and the 6 Harmonies Golden Body. To compare it with the divine abilities from this world, I must first understand the divine abilities here before I can give you a fair answer, Elder Huo said. Duan Lingtian nodded and mentioned the Elementary Devouring Tactic and Otherworldly Celestial. However, once he mentioned the Elementary Devouring Tactic, Elder Huo quickly interrupted him. Are you sure the divine ability you obtained is the Elementary Devouring Tactic? Yes. Duan Lingtian nodded. He had no idea why Elder Huo would suddenly lose his composure. Was there something wrong? Elder Huo took a deep breath and slowly said, describe the Elementary Devouring Tactic to me. Duan Lingtian set his curiosity aside and began to describe the divine ability, the Elementary Devouring Tactic, to Elder Huo without missing any details. It's really the Elementary Devouring Tactic. After listening to Duan Lingtian's description, Elder Huo fell momentarily silent before his eyes brightened. This gave Duan Lingtian a shock. Elder Huo, based on your words, you seem to know the Elementary Devouring Tactic. This Elementary Devouring Tactic is a really remarkable divine ability. Elder Huo looked at Duan Lingtian and said honestly, in terms of grade, it's slightly inferior to the Golden Crow's Wings that I taught you. However, that's only the case if it's cast by someone from the Golden Crow clan. Otherwise, I would say the Golden Crow's Wings you cast is the same grade as it. Same grade. Although Elder Huo said it was only the same grade if Duan Lingtian cast the Golden Crow's Wing, he was still stunned. Even if he was not a part of the Golden Crow clan and could not use the Golden Crow's Wings to its full potential, it was still a divine ability from the Devata realm. It was not something the divine abilities from the mundane world could compare to. How could he not feel shocked when he found out the Elementary Devouring Tactic he obtained was not inferior to the Golden Crow's Wings? Elder Huo stared at Duan Lingtian with a burning gaze as he asked curiously, how did you obtain the Elementary Devouring Tactic? Duan Lingtian instantly recounted his experience in the Abyssal Swamp when he heard Elder Huo's question. I didn't think the mundane world would have the Elementary Devouring Tactic. The Elementary Devouring Tactic is extremely remarkable even in the Devata realm. There's only a handful of people who have mastered it. Elder Huo exclaimed. What? Although Duan Lingtian already knew the Elementary Devouring Tactic was remarkable, he was still surprised when he heard Elder Huo's words. The Elementary Devouring Tactic is also a remarkable divine ability in the Devata realm. Yes. Elder Huo nodded. The elementary devouring tactic is also a very famous divine ability in the Devata realm. In addition to its extraordinary ability, it is, more importantly, the foundation of the advanced devouring tactic. One must master it before they can even attempt to cultivate or master the advanced devouring tactic. The advanced devouring tactic? Duan Lingtian was dumbfounded. There's an advanced devouring tactic? Naturally. Elder Huo nodded yet again as his eyes contained hints of respect. The advanced devouring tactic is a top-tier divine ability in the Devata realm. The owner of this divine ability is one of the overlords in the Devata realm. His strength could be considered to be in the top 3 in the Devata realm. Once Elder Huo finished his sentence, Duan Lingtian gasped involuntarily. The advanced devouring tactic was a top-tier divine ability in the Devata realm. Moreover, the owner of the advanced devouring tactic was one of the overlords from the Devata realm. His strength could be considered to be in the top 3 among all the overlords in the Devata realm. Although the information Elder Huo had revealed to him was not much, every one of it was earth-shattering news to Duan Lingtian. Rumor has it that the elementary devouring tactic is derived from the advanced devouring tactic, and the person who created the elementary devouring tactic is the same powerhouse. Even Elder Huo was respectful and filled with admiration when he spoke about that powerhouse. I didn't expect the elementary devouring tactic I obtained has such a shocking backstory, Duan Lingtian commented. However, I mainly relied on the Sun True Origin to obtain the elementary devouring tactic. In that regard, I have to thank you, Elder Huo. If it wasn't for you enlightening me and helping me to cultivate the Sun True Origin, I wouldn't have made it through the Abyssal Swamp's trials and obtained the divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic. Duan Lingtian looked at Elder Huo in gratitude. The first few trials in the Abyssal Swamp was still alright. One would be able to pass the trials as long as one's strength was at the eminent saint stage. However, even a powerhouse at the divine saint stage, exemplary saint stage or even the quintessential saint stage might not be able to pass the final trial, let alone an eminent saint stage powerhouse. This was because the opponent from that trial would raise or lower his cultivation base accordingly to the level of the challenger. Chapter 1795. Until now, Duan Lingtian still felt fear lingering in his heart when he recalled the strength the old man had demonstrated with the cultivation of an early refined saint stage powerhouse during the final trial in the Abyssal Swamp. If it was other ordinary martial cultivators, it would be impossible for them to defeat that old man even if their cultivation base had reached the peak of the refined saint stage. For this reason, in his opinion, the reason he had passed the final trial of the Abyssal Swamp and obtained the elementary devouring tactic was all thanks to the Sun True Origin Elder Huo had given him. When Elder Huo heard Duan Lingtian's words, he merely smiled nonchalantly. It's your fate since you managed to obtain the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda and meet with me, it's also your fate for being able to obtain the legacy from the Saint Sword Feng Qingyang. This time, it's also your fate for obtaining the elementary devouring tactic. All in all, the reason you obtained the elementary devouring tactic is not mainly due to the Sun True Origin. It's all fated. Even Elder Huo could not help but muse over Duan Lingtian's fate and luck. When he recalled his past, among the people he knew in the Devata realms, very few people could be mentioned in the same breath as Duan Lingtian in regards to fate. Naturally, he did not say this to Duan Lingtian. In his opinion, it would only harm Duan Lingtian if he told him about it. If Duan Lingtian became negligent because he knew about his fate, he might not be able to achieve anything great even with such amazing luck. Fate was like one's luck. However, one could not solely depend on it. Elder Huo had lived for many years and had witnessed many sad tragedies. For this reason, he did not wish for Duan Lingtian to follow in those people's footsteps. Duan Lingtian fell silent when he heard Elder Huo's words. Now that he thought about it, he was indeed lucky. Naturally, as someone whose soul had transmigrated over from another world, Duan Lingtian did not take his luck or fate for granted. In his opinion, his soul transmigrating to this world was the luckiest thing to have happened to him. Otherwise, he would have been dead. Duan Lingtian had the right mindset in regards to this. Naturally, Elder Huo did know this, so he did not reveal his thoughts to Duan Lingtian. Elder Huo, I'll begin to look for materials to repair the 4th level of the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda soon. Duan Lingtian bade Elder Huo farewell before he went to the 3rd level of the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda to cultivate. Ji Yuli should have returned from the Rising Sky Mansion by the time he came out from his closed-door cultivation. During his closed-door cultivation, Duan Lingtian wanted to focus more on raising his cultivation base and also to further comprehend the profundity of the Supreme Sword Dao mental cultivation method, the Sovereign Heart Sword. Currently, he had only comprehended the second stage of the Sovereign Heart Sword, the Sword Shadowed Heart. The Sovereign Heart Sword had 5 stages in total. He still had a long journey to go. While Duan Lingtian was cultivating, the fourth-rate force located far away, the Rising Sky Mansion, suffered a huge catastrophe. The Rising Sky Mansion was originally peaceful and tranquil. However, a commotion broke out when their mansion master was killed by a mysterious powerhouse. The mansion master of Rising Sky Mansion was the strongest person in the Rising Sky Mansion. Very few people in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land could kill him without alerting anyone. For this reason, the group of Mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials and disciples was in a panic when they learned their mansion master had been killed. Subsequently, a few other Rising Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials were killed as well. In the end, almost every Mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking official was killed. Even the outstanding Rising Sky Mansion's disciples were not spared. The Rising Sky Mansion's people who were killed had one thing in common. All of them knew that Xu Jing, the young mansion master of their Rising Sky Mansion, had cultivated an elite Devil Dao cultivation method that contained the soul congregation technique. However, they would never know, even in death, that the cause of this calamity was because of the cultivation method their young mansion master, Xu Jing, had cultivated. The people who made their moves were none other than the people from the Mystical Sky Mansion. Among these people, Ji Yuli was the weakest one. Naturally, he was only here to watch the fun. From the beginning until the end, he did not have any chance to make his move at all as he followed his father, Ji Yu Siyun. Apart from Ji Yuli, the next weakest people were the Vice Mansion Masters of Mystical Sky Mansion. It was exactly because of this, they managed to remove the backbone of Rising Sky Mansion before most of them could figure out what was happening. Has everything been cleaned up? In the sky above the Rising Sky Mansion's estate, a group of people gathered from all directions. They were none other than the Mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials. The person who had spoken was none other than Meng Qing, the Mansion Master of Mystical Sky Mansion. Ji Yu Siyun, who was standing with Ji Yuli, replied, "Mansion Master, the east side has been cleared." The old man standing together with Zhao Dang replied as well, "The west side has been cleared too." This old man was Zhao Dang's father. He was the other guardian of the Mystical Sky Mansion. In the Mystical Sky Mansion, his strength was on par with Ji Yu Siyun. He was only inferior to the Mansion Master. The 4 Palace Masters led by Zhu Luqi, the Palace Master of Heaven Palace, had also arrived. Zhu Luqi respectfully said to Meng Qing, "Lord Mansion Master, the southern side has also been cleared." As for the other Vice Mansion Masters, they followed Meng Qing and were in charge of the northern side as well as dealing with those who tried to escape. After all, this matter had to be dealt with as discreetly as possible. Since this matter involved a top-tier Devil Dao cultivation method, even the Mountainshade Black Market and Azure Cloud Mansion would be interested in it. Very good. Meng Qing nodded his head in satisfaction. Xu Jing, the young mansion of the Rising Sky Mansion, has already been transferred to a secluded place by me. Since we've already cleaned up what should have been cleaned up, we can return now. However, judging by Xu Jing's conditions, his soul that has yet to recover might not be able to endure it if we use the soul-searching secret tactic on him. For this reason, we'll bring him back for now and lock him up, Meng Qing said. He had used the soul congregation technique previously, and his soul was obliterated. Due to this reason, it'll take a few years, at least, for it to recover. We'll have to wait for another year and a half or so before we can use the soul-searching secret tactic on him. Otherwise, judging by his current condition, I'm afraid his soul will shatter completely before we can extract any information regarding the Devil Dao cultivation method from his soul. Ji Yu Siyun nodded. Then, let's wait for another year and a half or so. I hope the Devil Dao cultivation method he obtained is not the inhuman type. In that case, our Mystical Sky Mansion will definitely be able to rise up even higher in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land with the help of that cultivation method. Zhao Jin's eyes flashed when he spoke. He was the old man standing next to Zhao Dang. He was the other guardian of Mystical Sky Mansion. His tone was slightly excited when he reached the end of his sentence. The moment these words left his mouth, even Meng Qing, the mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion, could not help but slightly lose his composure, let alone the others. In the Dao Martial Saint Land, the Mystical Sky Mansion was one of the quasi-third-rate forces. In ordinary people's opinion, the mystical Sky Mansion was one of the most elite forces in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. However, only those people who stood at a higher level in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land knew that despite being a quasi-third-rate force, the mystical Sky Mansion was still far inferior compared to the Mountain Shade Black Market and the Azure Cloud Mansion that were quasi-third-rate forces. At this moment, Qian Ping Sheng, the Palace Master of Yellow Palace, said hesitantly, "Lord Mansion Master." It immediately disrupted the joyous atmosphere. Everyone, including Meng Qing, shifted their attention to Qian Ping Sheng. Yes, Meng Qing was curious. One person might have escaped. Qian Ping Sheng smiled wryly. One person might have escaped. The moment these words left his mouth, everyone, including Zhu Luqi, the Palace Master of Earth Palace, and the Palace Master of Mystical Palace, could not help but feel horrified. Before Meng Qing could speak, Zhao Jin looked at Qian Ping Sheng and asked in a near interrogative tone, "Didn't Palace Master Zhu said everything's cleared?" "Junior brother Qian, what's going on?" Zhu Luqi looked at Qian Ping Sheng with a very grave expression since he did not mention this to him earlier. Qian Ping Sheng looked at Zhu Luqi and said, "Senior brother Zhu, didn't Xu Jing have a lackey?" "We didn't find that lackey, did we? That hunchback lackey of Xu Jing?" Upon hearing that, Zhu Luqi's frown eased up immediately. He's merely Xu Jing's lackey, and I'm sure he doesn't know about Xu Jing obtaining that devil Dao cultivation method, right? Moreover, while we were cleaning up the mess, nobody mentioned anything about the lackey knowing anything about that cultivation method. Those people were all arrogant so they might not bother with Xu Jing's lackey. Qian Ping Sheng shook his head. Originally, I wasn't too bothered by that lackey. However, something seems to be amiss when I thought about it. I heard that a year before the Rising Sky ranking battle took place, Xu Jing's lackey was not in the Rising Sky Mansion's district and had seemingly followed Xu Jing when he left. If he had followed Xu Jing, this means... Before Qian Ping Sheng could finish his sentence, he was already interrupted by Ji Yun. At the side I was in charge of, one Rising Sky Mansion's disciple had mentioned that Xu Jing's lackey had accompanied him to the Rising Sky ranking battle. In the end, he even followed Grand Elder Xu Sen of Rising Sky Mansion back here. Other than that Rising Sky Mansion's disciple, nobody mentioned him at all. It seems like nobody had taken him seriously. After all, his position was extremely low in the Rising Sky Mansion. However, if he had followed Xu Jing when Xu Jing left, I'm sure he must know about that devil Dao cultivation method. When Ji Yun reached the end of his sentence, his expression had turned completely grave. The side I was in charge of also had one person who mentioned Xu Jing's lackey. However, since the lackey was at the side Palace Master Zhu was in charge of, I didn't investigate more. I thought Palace Master Zhu would get rid of him, I didn't expect him to escape. Zhao Jin looked at Zhu Luqi accusingly. What? Horror dawned on Zhu Luqi. He did not expect the only person who managed to escape had done so under his watch. Lord Mansion Master, although we don't know for certain if Xu Jing's lackey knows about that devil Dao cultivation method, we have to search for him before he disappears. He doesn't seem to be in the Rising Sky Mansion's estate in the first place, Qian Ping Sheng chimed in. Chapter 1796. Qian Ping Sheng's words also helped absolve Zhu Luqi and the other two palace masters of their responsibilities. When they were searching the Rising Sky Mansion's estate earlier, it was only him who had intentionally gone to search for Xu Jing's lackey to catch him. Zhu Luqi and the other two had even told him it would be alright if they did not find him since that insignificant little lackey definitely would not know anything about the devil Dao cultivation method. For this reason, the moment Qian Ping Sheng's words left his mouth, Zhu Luqi, the Palace Master of Earth Palace, and the Palace Master of Mystical Palace instantly looked at him gratefully. Since Xu Jing's lackey was not in the Rising Sky Mansion's estate, he must not have escaped under their watch. Nobody could blame them for this. Since he's not in the Rising Sky Mansion's estate, then he must be unaware of the incident here. In that case, let's find him ourselves and kill him to avoid future trouble. Meng Qing said as a piercing light flashed across his eyes. Since there was one person who escaped their grasps, the group of people who were about to return to the Mystical Sky Mansion had to delay their return for now. Nobody had any objection about this. Everyone wanted to catch this person and kill him to avoid future trouble. In fact, this was a serious matter. If this news spread out, it would definitely impact their Mystical Sky Mansion greatly. If it was a wicked devil Dao cultivation method, then it was still okay, since nobody would worry their mystical sky mansion would cultivate such a method and risk universal condemnation. However, if that devil Dao cultivation method was a slightly normal one, it would rouse covetous thoughts from the others. Naturally, only quasi-third-rate forces in the lower province of the Dao martial saint land would dare to covet the cultivation method the mystical sky mansion obtained. The other forces would not be so brave as to covet the things they obtained. Instead of saying they were not brave enough, it was more accurate to say they did not possess the strength to do anything even if they covet it. In the lower province of the Dao martial saint land, the mystical sky mansion did not fear the other quasi-third-rate forces much. However, they had no choice but to be wary of the mountainshade black market and the azure cloud mansion. If the two forces came knocking on their door asking for the devil Dao cultivation method, they really had no other choice but to give it up. Not only that, but apart from the mountainshade black market and the azure cloud mansion, the mystical sky mansion were even more afraid of the powerhouses from the upper province of the Dao martial saint land. Although it was rare for a powerhouse from the upper province to come to the lower province, the news would eventually spread to the upper province. There was no doubt even the powerhouses from the upper province would be interested in the devil Dao cultivation method that contained the soul congregation technique. It was exactly because of this the mystical sky mansion would never allow the news regarding the devil Dao cultivation method to spread out. According to the servant who knows the lackey by Xu Jing's side, the lackey must have gone back home to visit his family if he's not in the rising sky mansion's estate. Soon after, the group of mystical sky mansion's high-ranking officials confirmed this news. At the same time, they also inquired about the location of Xu Jing's lackey's hometown. It was a small town 1,000 miles south of the rising sky mansion's estate called the Hump Town. Hump Town was a very special town. Almost every resident of this town was born with a hunchback. That hunchback lackey by Xu Jing's side was also a resident who was born and raised in the Hump Town. Not only that, but he was also a genius martial cultivator whom everyone in the Hump Town knew. Naturally, he was only a genius martial cultivator in the eyes of the Hump Town's people. Are you here to look for Rong Fan? Rong Fan is the pride of our Hump Town. He's also the only one in the history of Hump Town to live such a comfortable life. Do you know the Rising Sky Mansion? It's a fourth-rate force, you know. He's making a living there. When the residents of Hump Town heard that somebody from the mystical sky mansion was looking for Rong Fan, every one of them was very enthusiastic. Naturally, the people who came were not the group of high-ranking officials from the mystical sky mansion. Instead, they were just ordinary disciples from the nearby operation base of mystical sky mansion. Even if their looks were memorized, nobody would know who they were. Old man, I came from the rising sky mansion to look for Rong Fan for some urgent matter. Is he in town? A mystical sky mansion's young disciple asked an old Hump Town's resident with an anxious look on his face as though there was really an urgent matter. Rong Fan returned a while ago, and it's said that he'll be staying for some time. His house is located at the eastern side of our Hump Town. The biggest mansion belongs to him. When the old Hump Town's resident spoke about Rong Fan, his face was filled with pride. As someone who had been staying in a fourth-rate force like the Rising Sky Mansion, Rong Fan had always been the pride of Hump Town. Eastern side. After the few mystical Sky Mansion's disciples who came to Hump Town learned about the location of Rong Fan's house, they secretly reported it to the mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials and made their way to Rong Fan's house. Ah, all of you are disciples from the Rising Sky Mansion. After the few mystical Sky Mansion's disciples said they were from the Rising Sky Mansion, Rong Fan's parents were very enthusiastic in welcoming them. Little Fan must have troubled all of you. Both of us apologize on his behalf if he has done anything wrong before. Although both of Rong Fan's parents were cultivators as well, they were merely ordinary martial cultivators. When they learned the people before them were disciples from the Rising Sky Mansion, they were terrified. One of the mystical Sky Mansion's disciples who was quick-witted replied, "Uncle, Auntie, there's no need for both of you to be so nervous. The reason we came to find Rong Fan is due to Lord Mansion Master's order. Young Mansion Master has already awakened, and we need him to return immediately to attend to him." The young Mansion Master has awakened. Outsiders might have thought the young Mansion Master of Rising Sky Mansion had died. However, since they were Rong Fan's parents, it was only natural they knew the young Mansion Master their son served was actually alive. Only both of them in the entire Hump Town knew about this. Rong Fan had strictly warned them not to spread the news out. For this reason, after hearing the mystical Sky Mansion's disciple mentioning this matter, they were completely convinced these people were disciples from the Rising Sky Mansion. Little Fan has gone out since morning. I think he'll only return in the evening. We don't know where he went. Would you like to wait in our house? Wrong Fan's parents suggested. The few Mystical Sky Mansion's disciples exchanged glances with each other. At the same time, they received the approval from the Mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials lurking in the dark. Due to this reason, they agreed to Wrong Fan's parents' suggestion. He has gone out. Soon after, Meng Qing, the mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion, and the others who were lurking outside the town learned about this news. Quickly secure the town. Apart from that, do an inch-by-inch search around the town's perimeter. If you see any town citizen, just knock them out to stop them from telling Wrong Fan anything if they encounter him, Meng Qing quickly ordered. If they wanted to take out Wrong Fan, they would have to be extremely meticulous in their plan. However, Meng Qing was still a step too late when he learned about the news of Wrong Fan not being in Hump Town. Many citizens who had left the town earlier had already gone far away. Although the Mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials carried out an inch-by-inch search by the perimeter of the town, there were still one or two who managed to escape. Several hundred of miles away from Hump Town, a Hump Town citizen who possessed quite a good cultivation base encountered Wrong Fan and greeted him, Wrong Fan. Wrong Hong. Wrong Fan chuckled when he saw this person. What, are you heading somewhere? I'm going to Southern Steel City. You must be on your way back from there, right? Wrong Hong answered him before asking with a smile. Yes. Wrong Fan nodded. I went to buy some things for my parents. Hee hee, Wrong Fan, you're living quite a good life, huh? Initially, I thought your position would be downgraded since the young mansion master you served has been killed. I can't believe people from the Rising Sky Mansion would personally come to town to look for you. Wrong Hong chuckled. What? When Wrong Fan heard this, he was taken aback. The people from the Rising Sky Mansion came to look for me. When he heard this news, the first thought that appeared in his mind was that it was impossible. In the past, when he was serving the young mansion master, although his position was not too high, it was not too low either. For this reason, many people below him would fawn over him. However, ever since that young mansion master's soul was shattered, and most people thought the young mansion master was dead, he no longer lived as well as he did previously. The people who used to fawn over him no longer bothered with him. As for those people who knew the young mansion master was still alive, they were all people with special identities and positions. Even before this incident happened to young mansion master, they had already looked down on him. It was impossible for them to come looking for him here. For this reason, when Wrong Fan heard that somebody from the Rising Sky Mansion had come to Hump Town to look for him, he found it too hard to believe. Who are they? What did they say? Wrong Fan felt a little panicked. It was hard to tell if he was afraid or flattered. No, they didn't. However, 5 of them came looking for you, Wrong Hong answered. 5 of them? Horror dawned on Wrong Fan's face immediately. 5 people claimed they came from the Rising Sky Mansion and were all looking for him. At this moment, he would have been living in vain all these years if he could not see that something was not right about this. Even if the young mansion master was not dead, it would have been impossible for so many Rising Sky Mansion's disciples to come looking for him, let alone the fact that most people thought the young mansion master of Rising Sky Mansion had died. Something sounded fishy here. When Wrong Hong saw the horrified expression on Wrong Fan's face, he was surprised. When he regained his senses, he could not help but ask, what? Is there anything wrong? Nothing. Wrong Fan shook his head before looking at him solemnly. Wrong Hong, you mustn't tell anyone you encountered me today, especially those few people who claim to have come from the Rising Sky Mansion. Remember, you must remember this. After he finished saying this, he left without even turning his head. Naturally, he did not return to Hump Town. Instead, he made his way to the Rising Sky Mansion's estate since he felt that something was amiss. When he arrived in the vicinity of the Rising Sky Mansion's estate, even from afar, he could feel something was off with the atmosphere in the estate. Although he could not see anything from outside, he felt a little skeptical due to Wrong Hong's words earlier. I should hide first. Wrong Fan hid outside the Rising Sky Mansion's estate as he patiently waited. There was something he wanted to confirm. After he had waited for 3 whole days and nights, a strange yet familiar figure appeared in his sight. Isn't this person Zhao Ji from the Mystical Sky Mansion? Wrong Fan very quickly identified the figure. Chapter 1797. Although Wrong Fang was an insignificant person in the Rising Sky Mansion, the person he served was the young mansion master of the Rising Sky Mansion. Due to this reason, he had encountered and seen many people and things before. About 5 years ago, he had followed Xu Jing, the young mansion master of Rising Sky Mansion, out and had met Zhao Ji from the mystical Sky Mansion. According to his young mansion master, Zhao Ji was the second-generation strongest person in the mystical Sky Mansion. This was why he could identify Zhao Ji. This was someone even his young mansion master did not dare to offend. When he saw Zhao Ji earlier, he did not recognize him immediately. He felt that he looked familiar. After searching his mind, he finally managed to identify Zhao Ji. As for the two people following behind Zhao Ji, he did not know them and had no impression of them at all. According to young mansion master at that time, Zhao Ji is the only son of Zhao Dang, one of the vice mansion masters of mystical Sky Mansion. Moreover, his grandfather is one of the two great guardians of the mystical Sky Mansion. When Rong Fan recalled Xu Jing's words from before, he could not help but shudder. The two great guardians of the mystical Sky Mansion were only inferior to the mansion master of mystical Sky Mansion. They were in no way inferior to the mansion master of their Rising Sky Mansion. Why is Zhao Ji here at the Rising Sky Mansion's estate? When Rong Fan saw Zhao Ji was heading to the Rising Sky Mansion's estate, he had a curious expression on his face. As far as he knew, the Rising Sky Mansion and mystical Sky Mansion did not have any interactions with each other. Why would Zhao Ji, the strongest person among the second-generation disciples in mystical Sky Mansion, come to the Rising Sky Mansion? Rong Fan was baffled and was mulling over it for a long time when a figure suddenly appeared out of nowhere in the sky above the Rising Sky Mansion's estate. It was a middle-aged man who resembled Zhao Ji slightly. Don't tell me this person is Zhao Ji's father. Vice Mansion Master Zhao Dang from the mystical Sky Mansion. It was only natural for Rong Fan to come to this conclusion since the middle-aged man and Zhao Ji resembled each other. The middle-aged man was indeed Zhao Dang. Zhao Dang descended from the sky as he appeared before Zhao Ji and the two others before he asked with a frown, "Jir, why are you here? Didn't I ask you to wait for the news at home?" Zhao Dang's tone contained a hint of annoyance. Zhao Ji stared at Zhao Dang with a burning gaze as he asked in slight desperation, "Father, you didn't return for such a long time, so I came here to take a look. How is it? Did you manage to obtain that Devil Dao cultivation method? We must wait until the soul of the young mansion master of Rising Sky Mansion recovers a little before we can use the soul-searching secret tactic on him to obtain that Devil Dao cultivation method." Zhao Dang shook his head. "Once everything here is dealt with, we'll bring him back to the mystical Sky Mansion." "All right," Zhao Ji nodded before asking curiously again, "Father, why is this taking so long?" It was because Zhao Dang did not come back after a certain time that Zhao Ji took the initiative to come on his own since he wanted to know what was happening. He was eager and desperate to get his hands on the Devil Dao cultivation method the young mansion master of the Rising Sky Mansion had cultivated. Once he obtained it, his strength would rise quickly as well. At that time, even Ling Tian would not be a match for him. He wanted to snatch back all the glory that used to belong to him. Something happened. There's no news about the lackey of the young mansion master of Rising Sky Mansion. However, Lord Mansion Master and your grandfather have gone to the lackey's hometown, so they should be able to catch him, Zhao Dang replied. A lackey probably doesn't know about the top-tier Devil Dao cultivation method that Xu Jing cultivated, right? Zhao Ji frowned. Why are they going to such great lengths just for a lackey? That lackey's not just an ordinary lackey. When Xu Jing obtained the Devil Dao cultivation method, he was there as well. He had also accompanied Xu Jing to the Rising Sky ranking battle. Zhao Dang replied solemnly, "For this reason, if he doesn't die, danger will definitely lurk around our mystical Sky Mansion due to our actions." Zhao Ji's eyes gleamed coldly as he said in his deep voice, "With Lord Mansion Master and grandfather personally making a move, he'll definitely die. Jir, return for now. If Lord Mansion Master finds out that you came here, he'll definitely rebuke you." Zhao Dang urged Zhao Ji in his deep voice. "Isn't Ji Yuli here as well?" Zhao Ji frowned, feeling slightly discontented. As Zhao Ji's father, naturally, Zhao Dang could hear the discontentment in Zhao Ji's voice. He shook his head and replied, "Don't feel discontented over this. Apart from Ling Tian's contribution, Ji Yuli has contributed in this matter as well. Put everything aside, you're far inferior compared to Ji Yuli in terms of ability as well." When Zhao Dang reached the end of his sentence, there was a hint of exasperation in his tone over his son's performance. "If you have the time to live such a leisurely and carefree life, why don't you enter closed-door cultivation instead? Otherwise, put Ling Tian aside, you won't even be a match for Ji Yuli. Ling Tian. Zhao Ji's eyes gleamed coldly and were filled with killing intent. He won't be able to live for long. Zhao Deng looked at the two people behind Zhao Ji and ordered, Bai Ju, He Tu, bring him back. The people who followed Zhao Ji here were none other than the mystical Sky Mansion's disciples, Zhao Baiju and Zhao He Tu. They were also the two people who had wanted to attack Duan Ling Tian at the summit of the mystical Sky Mansion's Heaven Palace. At that time, due to Ji Yuli's appearance, their plans were foiled. Yes, Master. Zhao Baiju and Zhao He Tu were Zhao Deng's direct disciple. Upon hearing his order, they quickly responded politely and looked at Zhao Ji in unison. Little junior brother, listen to Master. Let's return. Although Zhao Ji wanted to stay to join in the fun, he had no other choice but to return unwillingly since Zhao Deng would not allow him to stay. After the three of them left, Zhao Deng also returned to the Rising Sky Mansion's estate. Something seems wrong. Rong Fan was lurking far away. Due to the distance, he did not hear the conversation between Zhao Deng and Zhao Ji. Zhao Deng is the Vice Mansion Master of Mystical Sky Mansion. What's he doing in our Rising Sky Mansion's estate? Rong Fan took a deep breath before he made up his mind. I must be cautious. I can't return to the Rising Sky Mansion's estate for a while. I can only return and have a look after Zhao Deng has left. The moment he thought of this, he began to search for a place to hide nearby. At the same time, he did not forget to monitor the path one would need to take from the Rising Sky Mansion to the Mystical Sky Mansion. The group of high-ranking officials led by Mansion Master Meng Qing stayed for an entire month in Hump Town, but they still did not find any clue regarding Rong Fan's whereabouts. Rong Fan did not return that evening as his parents had said he would. It was as though he had vanished into thin air. Ji Yu Si-yun, one of the two great guardians of Mystical Sky Mansion, said with a grave expression, currently, I can say for sure that Rong Fan must have known something. He must have suspected the identities of that few disciples. That day, although our men had rounded up the people who were leaving Hump Town, there were 7 people whom we did not catch up to. Among those 7 people, there must be some of them who had encountered Rong Fan and told him about this. Zhao Jin, the other guardian, also chimed in. 2 guardians, please make a trip personally and catch those 7 people. Make them swear on the lightning penalty oath to see if they met Rong Fan. Meng Qing ordered. He also felt the problem lay with 7 people who had gotten away. With Ji Yu Si-yun and Zhao Jin personally making a move, the truth would soon be revealed. Lord Mansion Master. When Ji Yu Si-yun and Zhao Jin returned, they brought a person with them. This person was none other than Rong Hong, who had greeted Rong Fan previously. When he was brought in, his entire body was trembling. The old man's strength scared him to the bottom of his heart and soul. They did not need to do anything, just their auras were enough to suffocate him. If the two of them did not show some mercy, he would have long suffocated to death. Lord Mansion Master, we have brought someone here. When he heard the 2 old men addressed a middle-aged man nearby as Lord Mansion Master, his vision blacked out for a moment, and he almost passed out. Lord Mansion Master, could it be that this person was the Mansion Master of Rising Sky Mansion? The Mansion Master of Rising Sky Mansion had personally come for Rong Fan. This damn Rong Fan, what have you done to the point that the Mansion Master of Rising Sky Mansion personally came as well? That's right, that time when I met Rong Fan, it was obvious there was something wrong with his expression. He looked as though he was going to run away. No wonder I didn't see him during this 1 month. The moment Rong Hong thought of this, his expression turned horrified. He had kept a secret for Rong Fan, but it did not cross his mind that it would implicate himself. Lord Mansion Master. When he thought the person standing before him was the Mansion Master of Rising Sky Mansion, he instantly kneeled down as his body trembled. I wasn't aware that Rong Fan is guilty of any crime. That's why I made this silly mistake. At this moment, Meng Qing finally found out that Rong Fan had escaped from the 2 guardians of Mystical Sky Mansion. Meng Qing looked at Rong Hong and asked for confirmation. Did he head toward the Rising Sky Mansion's estate? Yes. Rong Hong quickly nodded like a chicken pecking on the grains on the ground. He did not dare to dally at all. Zhao Jin raised his hand and killed Rong Hong immediately once he had lost his value. Meanwhile, Meng Qing looked at Qian Ping Sheng, the Palace Master of Yellow Palace, and ordered, Palace Master Qian, take 2 disciples with you and stay here for the time being. If Rong Fan returns, you must kill him immediately. Yes, Lord Mansion Master, Qian Ping Sheng replied. As for the others, follow me back to the Rising Sky Mansion. However, I suspect that Rong Fan didn't return to the Rising Sky Mansion's estate. Otherwise, the people we left there would have reported it to me long ago. At this moment, even Meng Qing, the mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion, had a grave expression on his face. Although the person who had escaped was someone with a lowly position, they had to capture him or else the Mystical Sky Mansion would definitely face troubles if news of this spread out. Duan Lingtian only learned about this after Ji Yuli had returned. Then, does this mean all of you haven't found any trace of Rong Fan at all before you returned? Duan Lingtian asked. Yes. Ji Yuli shook his head and smiled wryly. Currently, the palace master of Yellow Palace is personally staying in Humptown while Zhao Deng and his father are waiting in the Rising Sky Mansion's estate for Rong Fan to reveal himself. Chapter 1798. Rong Fan seems to be quite smart. To think he didn't return to the Rising Sky Mansion's estate. However, it's still a mystery whether he has learned about the incident, Duan Lingtian remarked as his eyes gleamed. He had met Rong Fan before. It was none other than that hunchback young man standing behind the young mansion master of Rising Sky Mansion, Xu Jing, in Nimble Valley. He was an inconspicuous person. The only reason Duan Lingtian remembered him was due to the hump on his back. However, he did not remember his appearance at all. He must not have known everything. Otherwise, the news would have spread before we even returned, Ji Yuli said. Currently, Zhao Deng and his father had brought some men with them to guard the Rising Sky Mansion's estate. Whoever enters the Rising Sky Mansion's estate can only enter but not leave. For this reason, we don't have to worry about the news of the Rising Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials and elite disciples being annihilated being spread out for the time being. If this news spread out, the Rising Sky Mansion would also have its name removed from the fourth-rate forces. However, the truth will eventually come out. How does Lord Mansion Master plan to deal with this in the future? Duan Lingtian asked curiously. According to Lord Mansion Master, Zhao Deng and his father will stay at the Rising Sky Mansion's estate for the time being. Eventually, he'll send someone to switch places with them. This will go on until the soul of the young Mansion Master of Rising Sky Mansion recovers and can withstand the soul-searching secret tactic, Ji Yuli replied. If the Devil Dao cultivation method that Xu Jing cultivates is an evil Devil Dao cultivation method, then he'll call off our men immediately. In that case, even if the news spread out, outsiders will only say we're acting on behalf of heaven and enforcing justice. However, if the Devil Dao cultivation method is the normal type, he'll send someone to guard the Rising Sky Mansion's estate in Humptown until we finally catch Rong Fan. When Duan Lingtian heard Ji Yuli's words, he did not think highly of Mansion Master Meng Qing's way of dealing with this matter, but he could understand his decision. Even if the Devil Dao cultivation method was an ordinary one, something would happen eventually even if the Mystical Sky Mansion constantly sent out people to guard the Rising Sky Mansion's estate. The truth would eventually come out anyway. It was still not a problem if the Mystical Sky Mansion locked an ordinary person up, but the problem was, the Rising Sky Mansion was a fourth-rate force and was also under the jurisdiction of a quasi-third-rate force. Eventually, someone from that quasi-third-rate force would go to the Rising Sky Mansion's estate. Once someone from that quasi-third-rate force was killed or locked up, the entire sect would be alerted. At that time, the Mystical Sky Mansion might not be able to hide the news of the Rising Sky Mansion's backbone and almost the entire sect had been killed. Naturally, even if the quasi-third-rate force did not discover or do anything, Duan Lingtian felt the truth could not be hidden for long. After all, an ordinary person would become careless when they had to constantly guard and monitor a place. Nobody would be able to guarantee they would not make a mistake. Although Duan Lingtian did not think highly of Mansion Master Meng Qing's method, he did not say anything at all. After all that was said and done, this matter was unrelated to him. He was not interested in that Devil Dao cultivation method whether it was a normal type or an inhumane type. After all, he had never once considered cultivating the Devil Dao cultivation method and switched to become a devil cultivator. After I have the Sun True Origin in my body, I haven't used the Devil Seal tablet. With the strength of my Sun True Origin that's currently equivalent to an early eminent saint stage powerhouse's True Origin, I should be able to kill all devil cultivators below the Divine Saint stage if I use the Devil Seal tablet. Duan Lingtian thought to himself excitedly. In fact, even in the Mystical Sky Mansion, there were very few people who were at the Divine Saint stage or higher. At the very least, from the information he had obtained, there were only 3 people in the Mystical Sky Mansion who had entered the Divine Saint stage. They were Mansion Master Meng Qing and the two mystical Sky Mansion's guardians, Ji Si Yun and Zhao Jin. Senior brother Ji Li, you're the son of Guardian Ji, so you must know his cultivation base, right? I heard that Guardian Ji is a divine saint stage powerhouse. When Duan Lingtian saw Ji Li from the corner of his eye, he suddenly remembered Ji Li was Guardian Gu's son. He must know about Guardian Gu's cultivation base. Yes, Ji Li answered bluntly with no intention to hide anything when faced with Duan Lingtian's question. My father's cultivation base has long broken through to the early divine saint stage just like Zhao Jin. Zhao Jin's also at the early divine saint stage. Duan Lingtian was surprised. Yes, Ji Li nodded. According to my father, there are only 4 people who are at the divine saint stage. Lord Mansion Master is the most powerful while my father and Old Manji are the weakest. 4 divine saint stage powerhouses. The 2 great guardians are the weakest ones. Duan Lingtian's eyes were as wide as saucers. Then, other than the Mansion Master, the other one is. Take a guess. Ji Li smiled. When Duan Lingtian saw the mischievous smile in his eyes, a figure appeared in his mind. Don't tell me it's the guardian of the Heaven Palace's spirit pool. Senior brother Ji Li, is that person your Grand Master? That's right. Ji Li nodded before he sighed. Grand Master is just too unlucky. That time, after he was severely injured, it caused his cultivation base to stagnate. Otherwise, with his former innate talent, he would have already reached the quintessential saint stage. Grand Master was supposed to travel and cultivate at the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, but due to his injury, he has no choice but to remain in the lower province. Isn't the upper province a place where only someone at the divine saint stage or higher can go? With Senior's strength, he can still go to the upper province if he wants to, right? Duan Lingtian asked curiously. Yes. Ji Li nodded his head before smiling wryly. Even so, as the martial Dao genius of his generation, Grand Master is unwilling to see those brothers with the same master surpass him one by one. It's because of his pride that he remains in the lower province and willingly guards the spirit pool. Duan Lingtian finally understood the situation. Senior brother Ji Li, is there any quintessential saint stage powerhouse in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land? Duan Lingtian asked a question that had always been on his mind. Yes, Ji Li answered affirmatively. Yes. However, as far as I know, there seems to be no one at the quintessential saint stage in the quasi-third-rate forces of the Dao Martial Saint Land, right? By right, although an exemplary saint stage powerhouse doesn't have eternal life yet, it won't be a problem for him to live up to 1 or 2,000 years old, right? If they can live that long, there must be someone who has broken through to the quintessential saint stage, right? Duan Lingtian was even more baffled. There are indeed some quintessential saint stage powerhouses, but they're not in any quasi-third-rate forces, Ji Li continued to say. Other than those reclusive powerhouses who don't reveal themselves, the only quintessential saint stage powerhouses in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land are the Watchers who watch over the link between the upper province and lower province. Watchers. Duan Lingtian frowned. Who are they? The Watchers are the quintessential saint stage powerhouses who come from first-rate forces from the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. Their duty is to monitor the lower province. Once a quintessential saint stage powerhouse appears in the lower province, he must immediately leave the lower province and go to the upper province. If he dares to cause a commotion in the lower province, the Watchers will decide the punishment for that quintessential saint stage powerhouse based on the severity of crime. Ji Li explained thoroughly. There was once a powerhouse who had broken through to the quintessential saint stage from the peak of the exemplary saint stage. He tried to unify the lower province with his strength. Guess what happened to him in the end? What happened? Duan Lingtian asked. If a quintessential saint stage powerhouse wanted to, he could indeed unify the lower province. He died. He was killed by the Watchers. Ji Li replied. What? Upon hearing Ji Li's words, Duan Lingtian was taken aback. The quintessential saint stage powerhouse was killed by the Watchers. According to the rules set by the first-rate forces in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, once a quintessential saint stage martial or Dao cultivator appears in the lower province, he must immediately leave the lower province to prevent him from messing up the balance of power in the lower province. Naturally, a quintessential saint stage powerhouse can choose to remain in the lower province, but he's not allowed to make any move at all. Once he makes his move, the Watchers will instantly kill him. It's precisely because of this that almost all powerhouses in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land who have broken through to the quintessential saint stage choose to leave. Although the lower province is good, it's no use being so powerful if there's nothing one can do. Only the upper province can be their stage, Ji Yuli told Duan Lingtian in one breath, informing him of things he was unaware of. All of these were not recorded in the books that he had read before. The first-rate forces in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land are really controlling. Duan Lingtian mused. Rumor has it that it's the three great colossuses, the three great sects, from the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land that passed down this order. The first-rate forces in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land are only acting according to the order that has been given to them, Ji Yuli added again. The three great sects. Upon hearing his words, Duan Lingtian's eyes narrowed immediately. The fire worship sect was one of the three great sects. His fiancée was taken away by somebody from the fire worship sect. He quickly suppressed his chaotic emotion before he finally regained his composure. No wonder there are no quintessential saint stage powerhouses in the quasi-third-rate forces in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. As it turns out, there are watchers watching over the place to prevent quintessential saint stage powerhouses from wreaking havoc in the lower province. Duan Lingtian finally understood. Currently, the most powerful people in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land must be the leader of the Mountainshade Black Market and the mansion master of the Azure Cloud Mansion, right? Duan Lingtian asked again. Yes, Ji Yuli nodded. According to my father, the leader of the Mountainshade Black Market and the mansion master of Azure Cloud Mansion both stand at the peak of the exemplary saint stage. Most importantly, both of them are devil cultivators, and their abilities are stronger than ordinary martial and Dao cultivators. Does this mean they can't make any moves after they've broken through to the quintessential saint stage? At that time, the Mountainshade Black Market and the Azure Cloud Mansion wouldn't be able to peacefully coexist, would they? Duan Lingtian asked again. It's not so easy to break through to the quintessential saint stage. Ji Yuli shook his head. Compared to the other powerhouses at the peak of the exemplary saint stage, both of them are too young. There's still a long way for them to go at the peak of the exemplary saint stage. For this reason, they have more than enough time to nurture a worthy successor before they leave. Chapter 1799. Moreover, even if they manage to break through to the quintessential saint stage, they could make a move if it's for defense purposes. For example, if someone in the sect they control has bad intentions, they can still make a move as long as they are not more than 100 years old, Ji Yuli said. Senior brother Ji Yuli, you just said that quintessential saint stage powerhouses are not allowed to make their moves in the lower province, right? You didn't say they're allowed to make a move if it's for defensive purposes. Duan Lingtian was baffled by the rules that the first-rate forces from the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land had set for quintessential saint stage powerhouses in the lower province. Indeed, an ordinary quintessential saint stage powerhouse wouldn't be allowed to make his move even if it's for defense purposes. However, there are some exempted cases as well. Quintessential saint stage powerhouses below 100 years old in the lower province are not allowed to take the initiative to make their moves, but they have a right to make a move if it's for defense purposes. Moreover, someone below the age of 100 who breaks through to the quintessential saint stage will usually be recruited by the Watchers into the first-rate forces in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land that they are in respectively, Ji Yuli continued to say. It's precisely because of this, the quintessential saint stage powerhouses below the age of 100 have some special rights in the lower province. If they forge a good connection with the Watchers might even turn a blind eye if they take the initiative to make a move as long as they don't go overboard. Upon hearing that, Duan Lingtian smiled wryly as he shook his head. It looked like no matter where it was, having connections would make things easier. The leader of the Mountainshade Black Market and the mansion master of the Azure Cloud Mansion are both below 100 years old. At the same time, this information finally sank into Duan Lingtian's mind. Yes, Ji Yuli nodded with an expression of admiration. Whether it's the leader of the Mountainshade Black Market or the mansion master of the Azure Cloud Mansion, both of them have the potential to enter the quintessential saint stage before they reach 100 years old. Such monsters are extremely rare in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. Entering the quintessential saint stage before 100 years old. Even Duan Lingtian could not help but feel astonished. Although he was confident he could enter the quintessential saint stage before 100 years old or even before 50 years old, he was only confident because he possessed the 7 Treasures Exquisite Pagoda. The time flow in the third level of the 7 Treasures Exquisite Pagodas was 5 times slower than the outside world after all, and this was only the third level of the 7 Treasures Exquisite Pagoda. Once the fourth level of the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda had been repaired, the time flow inside would be 8 times slower than the outside world. In other words, 1 day outside would equal to 8 days in the fourth level of the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda. Moreover, according to Elder Huo, the cultivation environment in the fourth level of the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda was much more powerful than the third level. Once the fourth level was repaired, his cultivation base would definitely be able to rise rapidly. The faster I can finish repairing the fourth level of the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda, the faster I can break through to the Eminent Saint stage and comprehend the divine abilities. At that time, I'll have some ability to protect myself when I head to the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. The moment Duan Lingtian thought of this, he quickly looked at Ji Yuli and changed the topic. Senior brother Ji Yuli, I have one favor to ask of you. Junior brother Lingtian, there's no need to be polite with me. Just tell me anything, and as long as it's within my ability, I, Ji Yuli, will do it for you even if I have to leap into a boiling cauldron or a blazing fire. Ji Yuli pledged solemnly. Duan Lingtian felt touched upon hearing his words. Well, there's no need for you to leap into a boiling cauldron or a blazing fire. I only need your help in looking for some materials, senior brother Ji Yuli. If it's convenient, I'd also like you to speak to Guardian Ji Yu for me. With Guardian Gu's connections, I'm sure it'll be more efficient to search for those materials. Senior brother Lingtian, you're being too polite. What do you mean by convenient or not? Come, follow me and see that old man of mine now. Even if he's in the midst of closed-door cultivation, I'll call him out for you. Ji Yuli reassured Duan Lingtian as he slapped his chest. There's no need for that. Duan Lingtian quickly shook his head. Ji Yuli chuckled before standing up and motioning to him. Junior brother Lingtian, let's go. Let's go meet my old man. He returned at the same with me, so I don't think he has entered closed-door cultivation yet. Moreover, he has been wanting to meet you. It's just that he hasn't had a chance to. Under Ji Yuli's lead, Duan Lingtian soon met with Ji Yu Si-yun. The latter even came out to welcome him, causing him to be overwhelmed by this unexpected favor. You're Lingtian, you're indeed an elite powerhouse. When Ji Yu Si-yun saw him, he smiled. He did not have the arrogant manner expected of a guardian from the mystical sky mansion. Come in and have a seat. Ji Yu Si-yun was mainly so nice to Duan Lingtian because he was his son's friend. In fact, his son did not have many friends in the mystical sky mansion, particularly a friend like Duan Lingtian whom he could open his heart to. He only had one friend like that, and it was Duan Lingtian. The other reason was due to the meritorious deed that he had given his son. This matter of discovering the young mansion master of Rising Sky Mansion cultivating a Devil Dao cultivation method was extremely important and significant to the mystical sky mansion. For this reason, the Lord Mansion Master had even personally praised his son and gave their Ji Yu clan many rewards. By reason and by right, he had no reason to dislike Duan Lingtian. Please, Guardian Ji Yu. Duan Lingtian felt overwhelmed by this unexpected honor. He did not act arrogantly or rashly. Instead, he maintained the manner of a junior when faced with Ji Yu Si-yun. Upon seeing this, Ji Yu Si-yun felt at ease in his heart. It seemed like his son had found a good friend. Naturally, he did not show the arrogance of a senior even when Duan Lingtian maintained the manner of a junior. From the beginning until the end, he was very enthusiastic. He treated Duan Lingtian like a kind and amiable elder. Ji Yu Si-yun personally poured a cup of tea for Duan Lingtian as he said with a smile, Lingtian, you don't have to address me as Guardian Ji Yu in the future when we're alone. Since you're Ji Yuli's friend, you can just call me Uncle Ji Yu. Uncle Ji Yu. Duan Lingtian was not someone who would stubbornly cling to traditional rules and ideas, so he did not reject this. Instead, his respect toward Ji Yu Si-yun had risen a few notches. He felt he was an elder worthy of respect. Seeing how Duan Lingtian and Ji Yu Si-yun was so courteous with each other, Ji Yuli, who was standing at the side, became impatient and said bluntly, Father, this is the first time junior brother Lingtian and I came to look for you. Other than wanting to meet you, he also wants to ask a favor from you to search for some rare materials. Oh, upon hearing his words, Ji Yu Si-yun looked at Duan Lingtian immediately. Little Tian, I wonder what materials that you need my help to search for. After a few rounds of conversations, the way Ji Yu Si-yun addressed Duan Lingtian had changed and became more intimate. Uncle Ji Yu, the materials I need are all here. With a raise of his hand, Duan Lingtian took out a drawing sheet that had many drawings of the materials he needed. Not only that, but there were also some descriptions at the side. He had prepared this during his free time when he was not in closed-door cultivation. Uncle Gu, please use your connections to help me search for these materials. As for how many saint stones you need, just give me a number later. However, the moment his words left his mouth, Duan Lingtian did not expect to see both Gu Xiyun and Gu Li's expressions to turn grave. After a while, he began to realize he had said the wrong thing. As expected, Gu Li looked at him and solemnly said, "Junior brother Lingtian, although we don't know each other for a long time, what matters the most is sincerity and the way we treat each other. In my heart, I've already long regarded you as a best friend of many years whom I can open my heart to. Don't you think it's a little too courteous of you to mention saint stones? Little Tian, Uncle Gu has no lack of saint stones. To be honest, if you're not Lear's best friend, I wouldn't have helped you no matter how many saint stones you brought." Gu Xiyun also made himself clear. "Uncle Gu, senior brother Gu Li, I'm wrong regarding this matter. I apologize." Duan Lingtian quickly apologized. He had already realized his mistake earlier. However, since the words had been said, it could not be taken back. All he could do was quickly mend this situation. Upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words, Gu Xiyun and Gu Li's expressions eased up immediately. Gu Xiyun glanced at the drawing paper in his hand before he said to Duan Lingtian, "I'll make multiple copies of this drawing and use my connections to search for them. However, there are some materials on this paper that even I have never seen before. For this reason, I can't guarantee that I'll be able to find all of them." Although he wanted to help Duan Lingtian to gather all these materials, he did not dare to guarantee it since he had not even seen some of the material on the paper. "I understand. Just do your best, Uncle Gu." Duan Lingtian nodded. He did not expect Gu Xiyun to find all the materials. According to Elder Huo, some of the materials were also quite rare even in the Devata realms. Now that the issue regarding the materials needed to repair the 4th level of the 7 Treasures Exquisite Pagoda was dealt with, Duan Lingtian finally was able to calm his mind and cultivate. As for the young mansion master of Rising Sky Mansion, Xu Jing, and the Devil Dao cultivation method he had cultivated, he did not ask about it. He was not interested at all. Although he was not interested, it did not mean other people would think so. A month later, Duan Lingtian was summoned by Meng Qing, the mansion master of the mystical Sky Mansion. Although this was his second time meeting Meng Qing, the first time he met him was with a group of people. However, today, it was only him, so the feeling was very different. Despite the difference in feeling, he was not nervous at all. "Mansion master." Duan Lingtian took the initiative to greet Meng Qing, who was sitting at the main hall. Just like before, he did not address him with the title, Lord. Meng Qing did not fuss over this matter as well. After he motioned for Duan Lingtian to sit with a smile, he said without beating around the bush, "Lingtian, it's all thanks to you that our mystical Sky Mansion learned that Xu Jing had cultivated a Devil Dao cultivation method that contains the soul congregation technique. Is this the reason you summoned me here, Mansion Master?" Duan Lingtian could not help but feel astonished. "Not entirely," Meng Qing shook his head before saying, "I heard you learned about Xu Jing cultivating the Devil Dao cultivation method that contains the soul congregation technique from your senior brother, Li Feng. Moreover, your senior brother Li Feng has already gone to the upper province to look for your master. I'm sure your master must know that Xu Jing had cultivated a top-tier Devil Dao cultivation method, right?"